And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark Dolan and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister. Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes,
she could have saved Storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next few hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it is yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me in the next hour, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly, and also broadcaster and author Christine Hamilton. In a few moments' time, we'll be going head-to-head in the clash with former Home Office Minister Norman Baker and also editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. The Tories, they suffered their biggest defeat in history, but what's next for the party? Are there any Conservative members left who trust them?
Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives.
You're not wrong. Then, for Nana's Ningle, I'll be giving my verdict on why the Tories lost. And this week, my outside guest now, she's a singer-songwriter known for her electric mix of musical styles and was born in the early 2000s. We've made sure she's fully blurred. Can you guess who she is? And then, in clickbait... Seagull flies into a store. What happens next? But before we get started, let's get your latest news headlines.
Thanks, Nana. 1 minute past 3, our top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian president that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the, quote, clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Well, the Prime Minister is beginning a UK tour today as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. Keir Starmer is heading to Edinburgh, where he's expected to meet First Minister John Swinney. The PM says his government will place Scotland back at the beating heart of everything it does. He's also promised to turn his back on, quote, tribalism and usher in an era of stability. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge today, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said that Rishi Sunak had run an, quote, idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Meanwhile, ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively conservative, with Labour support spread very thinly. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She also said there is only room for one Conservative party in British politics. She's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and, quote, neutralise the threat.
We lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Reform. Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives, and they went to an alternative, Reform. So I believe whoever's leading the party, whoever's in the party, needs to acknowledge this basic truth, that we are facing an existential threat from Reform. And we need to change ourselves to ensure that we neutralise that threat, that we bring those people back home.
Meanwhile, Reform UK Chairman Richard Tice told us the Tories have had their chance.
Well, look, I mean, our progress and success has been self-evident for the last 6 months. They all had the chance to join us, to defect to us, like Lee Anderson did. They decided to stay in the existing Conservative tent. And in a sense, there are consequences to people's decisions. They made that decision, and in a sense, they've paid the price. That's what competition is all about. I mean, we came second in almost 100 seats across the United Kingdom. We're now the dominant opposition in the north of England to the Labour Party. So we've made huge progress. And I come back, competition is a fundamental Conservative principle. They should believe in it.
The funeral of former Rugby England international Rob Burrow is taking place in Pontefract. The 41-year-old died on June 2nd after a lengthy battle with motor neurone disease. Today's service coincides with Leeds Rhinos' annual celebration of Rob Burrow Day, marking the number 7 shirt that he wore during his rugby league career. Members of the public were invited to stand on the roadside and to pay their respects as the funeral cortege made its way to the service. England will face the Netherlands in the Euro semi-finals on Wednesday after beating Switzerland in Germany last night. The Three Lions squeaked past the Swiss on penalties 5-3 after the game ended 1-1 after extra time. Prince of Wales was among football fans rejoicing as England won, describing the match as nail-biting to the very end. In France, voters are heading to the polls for the second round of elections, including French President Emmanuel Macron, who cast his ballot earlier on. The result is expected to reconfigure the political landscape there, with National Rally likely to win the most votes, but fall short of a majority. Last Sunday, Marine Le Pen's party scored historic gains to win the first round. They've seen increased support off the back of voter concerns over the cost of living and immigration. Right, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It is fast approaching 7 minutes after 3 o'clock. We are Britain's news channel. I'm Nana Akua. Now, before we get stuck into the debates over the next hour, let me introduce you to my clashers. Today, joining me, former Home Office Minister Norman Baker and also editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Right, here's what else coming up in this hour. Could Suella Braverman be next in line for the Tory party leadership?
We lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Reform. Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives, and they went to an alternative, reform. That we are facing an existential threat from...
I wonder what she's facing a threat from. We'll try and play the next bit. I'm curious, but she was on earlier in Camila Tominey's show. And Keir Starmer's new government has made strides already in their first days in government, but are they right to scrap the Rwanda policy?
Look, the Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent. Look at the numbers that have come over in the first 6 and a bit months of this year. They're record numbers. That is the problem that we are inheriting. It has never acted as a deterrent, almost the opposite, because everybody has worked out, particularly the gangs that run this, that the chance of ever going to Rwanda was so slim, less than 1%.
Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off early?
So on a Friday, I've been doing this for years, I will not do a work-related thing after 6 o'clock.
Is that realistic for a Prime Minister? And in clickbait... What happens next? It's actually a swan. Tell me what you think on everything you're discussing. You can email or send me your comments via gbnews.com/your say. All right, we'll kick things off with Suella Braverman. Following the Tories' biggest election defeat in their history, she spoke to Camila Tominey earlier on GB News, and the question on everyone's mind was, will she be standing for leadership?
Can we just cut to the chase? Are you standing?
Oh, gosh. I know, Camilla, you want the drama, you want the headlines. I'm going to have to disappoint you.
Why?
No announcements. Listen,
Why are you holding back? Because it's obvious from your speech when you won your seat on Thursday night, early Friday morning. It's been obvious from some of the op-eds you've written before the election. It's certainly obvious from what you've written in the Sunday Telegraph today that you are, to use the press expression, on manoeuvres. So why not confirm that you want to lead the party?
Listen, because unlike 2019 and unlike in 2022, we have the luxury of being in opposition. There is no urgency to install a new leader. What is urgent and absolutely essential now is that we as a party reflect and accept what got us into this existentially damaging situation. And at the moment, that's what concerns me the most. There is still disagreement. There are many of my colleagues, both inside Parliament and outside, who believe that we just need to do more of the same.
Not more of the same. Well, listen, the Tories lost millions of voters in this election, and Suella suggests that they were betrayed.
We lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of reform. Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives, and they went to an alternative, reform. That we are facing an existential threat from reform.
So the threat is from reform, not perhaps on their own policies. In fighting scandals and a lack of trust that led to what some would say was their own downfall.
We're all in this together. That's why the first thing I said when I got re-elected was, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm sorry to the British people. My party let you down. I'm implicated as well. We're all in this together.
No, I get that.
I'm not passing the blame on to anybody else. We've all got to take responsibility.
What's done is done, and the Conservatives have a lot of rebuilding to do to gain back the public trust. But what are their ambitions moving forward?
We need some stability, and Rishi Sunak has announced that he's going to resign, but he has to stay in just to maintain and ordering a functional party. But we need to also, we can't, have this introspective soul-searching going on for, indefinitely. We also need to get fighting fit and start opposing the Labour Party, because I tell you what, they are going to use this window whilst we are navel-gazing to, bring in pretty harmful things to our country, whether it's on immigration, whether it's tax. We've already seen.
So all those things are joining me now is GBNews political correspondent Olivia Utley. Olivia, the former Home Secretary, what do you think about that? Suella Braverman is saying that the Conservatives need to spend time now reflecting. What do they need to reflect on? It's quite obvious what went wrong, surely.
Well, there are lots of Conservatives in the party, not just Suella Braverman, who's saying that we need to reflect on what went wrong. There is basically two schools of thought in the Conservative Party at the moment. There's the Suella Braverman school of thought, which is that the Conservatives lost all of these votes because of the existential threat from reform, because the Conservatives weren't doing enough about immigration, because the Rwanda plan didn't work, because the Conservatives refused to leave the ECHR, and that is why voters turned away from the Conservatives and towards reform. But that doesn't actually explain the whole reason why the Conservatives lost this election. If every single reform voter had gone over to the Conservatives in 2024, as Robert Jenrick pointed out today, the Conservatives would have won 290 seats, but that still wouldn't have been enough to win a majority, which means there is a gap for other Conservatives to talk into. And those Conservatives on the left of the party on the whole are suggesting that what went wrong is actually that the country veered too far to the right, and that actually the Lib Dems picked up 72 seats. If all of those seats had gone over to the Conservatives, then the Conservatives would have done really pretty well. So I think what we're going to see now over the next weeks and months ahead is a sort of fight for the heart and soul of the Conservative Party. Robert Jenrick actually wrote a very interesting piece in the Times this morning. He's a former immigration minister who quit alongside Suella Braverman because he didn't think that the Prime Minister was doing enough to get the Rwanda plan through. But before, he was a good friend of Rishi Sunak, and he says that actually it's not about whether they should tack to the right or whether they should tack to the left. It's about showing that they can deliver on what they've promised, which he says they didn't really do in the last government. So actually, really, there are three schools of thought going on. Move to the left, move to the right, or just show that you can actually do what you're promising to do. And I think that's the battle that we will see raging on right up until a new Conservative Party leader is elected. And the Conservatives aren't in a rush. This time round, they're not in government. Whoever their leader is will not be the new Prime Minister. So they're afforded the luxury of having a bit of time.
A bit of time, but not too long. Let's hope they don't navel-gaze for ages. Olivia Utley, thank you so much. Really good to talk to you. That is Olivia Utley. She's our political correspondent. She's out there in Westminster. Well, joining me now, my head-to-headers, former Home Office Minister Norman Baker and editor-at-large at the Mail on Sunday, Charlotte Griffiths. Right, so I'm going to start with you, Norman Baker. OK. Conservatives, Suella Braverman even admits that they deserved the defeat. But what is your view on why it all went wrong?
Well, there's a whole range of reasons. Been in power for a long time, and that was obviously people like change every now and then. Partygate was on the doorstep. I mean, people hadn't forgotten about Partygate and Boris Johnson. They hadn't forgotten about Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget and her 49 days in office. And they've just felt there was the corruption, there's all the scandals, and it was time for a change. That old-fashioned slogan was the one that resonated on the doorstep. But beyond that, if you look at the Lib Dem position, because it's relevant to the Conservatives, we can now walk or travel from Eastbourne to North Devon without leaving a Lib Dem constituency. We've got this swathe, this kind of orange wall now across the south, right the way across the south of the country. And those people in places like Henley, they weren't... I'm not saying immigration is not an issue, of course it is, but they were concerned about the cost of living, about the state of the NHS, about the economy falling to bits, about the sewage in the rivers. That's what was worrying them. So, if the Conservatives only concentrate on immigration, then they'll have the same result again.
Well, I don't think they did solely focus on immigration, actually. I think that's a little bit unfair. But again, I'm not quite sure what they were focusing on. Charlotte?
I agree with Jenrick. I think it's just a simple credibility issue. They just hadn't done a single Conservative thing for years. And the number one thing that we trust our Conservatives to do is to control our borders. And actually all those other things, protect our taxes, protect the NHS, they just didn't do any of them. It was simply a case of false promise after false promise, no credibility, and they had to have a change. And God knows that they lurched from one leader to the next. They tried every different flavour of leader, and they got to Sunak, and everyone thought, well, God, if this guy can't do it, he's literally a sort of man in a suit, boardroom kind of guy, and even he couldn't do it. So it had to be a change.
But it was a sort of, a lot of people will say that it sort of fell apart when they didn't listen to the electorate, when they actually got rid of Boris Johnson. Is that a fair criticism? I think that was the beginning of where people thought, hold on a minute.
Yeah, it was very disappointing because that felt a real... it was clear that the electorate did like Boris Johnson, but the blob got the better of them. Boris blames the media a little bit and that whole kind of hysteria that really took over. And actually, I think he should have stuck it out if he could have done. But yeah, it was very dispiriting to be a member of the general public. So many people backed Boris and out he went.
Well, he got an 80-seat majority and that's not to be sniffed at, which is...
No, he didn't. He did, but you've also got to remember that he was levered out in the end by his own colleagues, and about 50 ministers,
exactly.
50 ministers or thereabouts, basically the whole ministerial team, asked for him to go.
Well,
now, you know, that's a complete lack of no confidence from his own colleagues who were closest to him. So he had to go. He didn't want to go, but let's remember Boris was at Partygate. He also was guilty of suspending Parliament illegally, as a Supreme Court subsequently decided. You know, he was not a good Prime Minister. I'm sorry, he wasn't. And I felt a bit sorry for...
The electorate thought he was a good Prime Minister, and as you said, it was his members of his own party who got him out. Well, they didn't have a mandate to do that. You know, the electorate wanted him in.
Well, the electorate... to work on the Constitution. The electorate, of course, elects individual MPs for their constituency. They don't elect prime ministers. We're not in a presidential system. The prime minister was chosen by members of his own party, so they were the ones who put him in there. They're the ones who could take him out.
Technically, yes, but you know that the leader has a great influence on what people vote for. I mean, you take Reform with Nigel Farage, there was massive influence.
Yes, of course.
Also, you know, Boris Johnson, there was huge influence initially because we voted for Boris, which is why a lot of the general public are so dispirited that he was ousted.
And at the time, the general public all loved. I mean, every taxi driver, everyone, every supermarket worker, everyone you met was sort of quite pro-Boris as a leader, actually, at the time. And, yeah, of course, it's not a presidential system, but it was him that got that huge, huge majority, really, wasn't it?
Well, he also lost votes. I mean, I can only tell you what the Blue Wall was saying. The Blue Wall was not happy with the direction of travel. You know, the Conservatives who voted Lib Dem this time wanted sensible government, stable government, looking after the economy, looking after the NHS, dealing with the environment sensibly. They didn't feel they got any of that.
Well, I don't think they did get any of that. I think even the Conservatives who voted for the Conservatives didn't get any of that. I think they were a bit self-obsessed, weren't they? They were like, oh, we'll change the leader. How many Home Secretaries do we have in the last sort of 4 or 5 years?
Larry the Cat has seen off 5 Prime Ministers in Downing Street.
Crazy. Yeah. It just all built into this sense that you're a voting member of the general public and you have no control over other than, you know, casting your vote. They were infighting, they were making decisions, the blob, the civil service. It felt so, you know, I think members of the electorate felt so powerless, actually, and that was very frustrating for them, and that caused a lot of anger.
So if we're to pick a leader now for the Conservative Party, who would you think would be best positioned to do that?
There was a very good article in Times yesterday by William Hague, I thought it was very good anyway, and he's the only person in the Conservative Party who's been here and done this because he suffered in 97. He took over in 97 after the last catastrophic Conservative election. And he had some very good advice, part of which was you don't win from the fringes. Jeremy Corbyn didn't win from the left fringe, you don't win from the right fringe. You have to win from the centre. So if we get... I mean, it's not up to me, but if the Tories end up with Suella Braverman, in my view, there's a ceiling to what she will get from the public, and that will keep Labour and the Lib Dems where they are. The Tories have to come back to the centre, I think, to win the next election.
Do you think... I think a lot of people complain that they weren't Conservative enough. I think that's an observation, but I don't think that's true. Is it true that Conservatives need to come back to the centre? They weren't right-wing, they were liberal, they were more left-wing.
Well, I actually think the leaders that have done the best have got the centre and the right. So Boris had the centre and the right, and Cameron a bit the same. And if you have Suella, you've just got, you know, the sort of evil Tories trope that the left can just carry out time after time. So I actually think that you do have to have the centre and the right together.
Centre and the right together. Well, now what do you think? GBNews.com/you'll say. This is GB News, Britain's news channel, coming up. Will the Labour Party right to scrap the Rwanda policy? But next, is it time for electoral reform?
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Prince Harry obviously set up the Invictus Games in collaboration with Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, as part of their royal foundation, but Prince Harry took it under his wing separately. And last month he celebrated the 10th anniversary back in London. It's Invictus Games is an Olympic-style competition to help wounded veterans from various different countries with their rehabilitation through the power of sport. And that's what he's being honoured for. The reason he's got it is because of the positive impacts and I quote, on veteran communities through the power of sport. Pat Tillman, what the award is named after, he was a US war veteran. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2004. Prince Harry, of course, served 2 tours himself. Whether he deserves it, Martin, to answer your question, clearly the judges think that that is the case. Of course, I think what we're seeing from Prince Harry over the last couple of months is him really focusing on his passion, which is helping veterans and helping families of veterans, rather than what we've seen over the last few years, which is him talking about himself and complaining about his life as a working member of the royal family.
Now, Cameron, nobody can deny the importance of the Invictus Games. What an amazing achievement. Perhaps Prince Harry's finest achievement in terms of public relations.
Having someone like Prince Harry or another working member of the royal family with their fame can spotlight very worthy causes, such as the plight of veterans and those who feel like they've been left behind and do not have enough support when they come out of the British Armed Forces. And that's something, as you alluded to, Martin, that Prince Harry perhaps arguably has done very successfully over the last decade. And if Prince Harry's name wasn't on the Invictus Games, would it have done so well? That's probably the arguments they'd make. But as you say, not everyone's happy about the fact that Prince Harry's involved, but he is. Clearly, many people think he deserves it because he's getting this award in Los Angeles.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Just coming up to 24 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. This is The Clash. And the next question, is it time for electoral reform? Now, the Labour Party won a landslide majority at the election, grabbing 34% of the vote, yet secured nearly 3/4 of the seats, whilst the Liberal Democrats got 12% of the vote and 11% of the seats. But Reform UK, with over 4 million votes, so that was 14% of the vote, secured a measly 1% of the seats. Now, that doesn't sound right to me. Does it sound right to you? The first-past-the-post system brings stability that isn't stability. Is it time? Is it actually an electoral dictatorship? That is the question. So joining me to discuss, Norman Baker and also Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte?
I actually think we shouldn't reform. I think good old first past the post. Of course, this year's been a complete anomaly, and I think that, you know, because so many people are punishing the Tories, I don't think this will happen again. I think, obviously, there's been some very strange voting patterns. There's one school of thought that people who are voting reform just didn't even understand that they weren't voting for Farage outside of Clacton. And that's been debated quite a lot on the radios this morning. But I think it's fine as it is. I think if we change it up, then we might have what's going on in Europe, which is where they have PR. And I just think also the TikTok generation actually is a bit of a danger, because if a trend takes off in TikTok and you can vote directly for, you know, a particular leader that they're advertising or going on about, it can be quite dangerous. And these trends really take over on TikTok, and I'm a bit too old for TikTok.
Well, Keir Starmer is suggesting that the voting age should be lowered to 16, 17, and a lot of the young people are saying that they would have voted reform if that were the case.
Well, exactly. I mean, if you have a trend taking over on TikTok, and let's not forget who owns TikTok. I mean,
the Chinese, yeah.
Who owns X? You know, I think it's something we have to be aware of for future years.
Well, then surely that first past the post is the easiest one to manipulate with a system like that. I mean, is it not?
I think it probably is. And the idea that the number of seats in Parliament should reflect the number of votes cast seems to me to be uncontroversial. It's a policy Lib Dems have been pursuing for decades, and I'm delighted we now got some other people, the Greens and Reform, making the same point.
Well, the Labour Party had it in their manifesto.
The Labour Party, well, let's see if they deliver anything, because, of course, their enthusiasm may wane now they have a massive majority. But the reality is, looking at the results, every single party, apart from Labour, got fewer seats than it should have done, including Conservatives, than it should have done if the number of votes had been reflected accurately in seats in Parliament. And the thing is, first past the post was working OK in 1955 when there were two parties, Labour and Tory. It doesn't work now when you've got a multitude of people trying to do different things. You know, Labour and Tory together got 56% of the vote.
Yeah.
That's the lowest percentage of the two major parties, I think, ever. And you know, it doesn't, first past the post doesn't work. It can't reflect that diversity in our society these days.
Yeah, and also I think that the leader of that party that receives the highest sort of supposed vote, so in this case, Keir Starmer, will be slightly delusional into thinking that most of the country voted when only 80% of the people didn't actually vote for him. And the thing is, if you added his votes up, so I think they were 9.6 million, yet the Reform and also the Conservative Party have got about 10.7 million.
Well, you have to add Lib Dems to Labour in a way, but I mean,
but the point of it is that he did not get a majority at all.
No, he didn't. And if you look at the result he got, it's not very different to what Corbyn got in 2019. That was regarded as a disaster for the Labour Party and worst result ever for the Labour Party since Michael Foot. And he's got roughly the same result now with a massive landslide.
I think actually he got a worse result, Charlotte.
I think Keir Starmer is actually aware of that, though. He's kind of acknowledged it a few times, and actually so is Tony Blair at today's sort of media rounds when he's written an article. I think he is actually quite aware that it's a strange year and that he's won without having as many people vote for him as voted for Conservative and Reform. But I honestly think it will balance out next time there's a general election. I think this is a particularly extraordinary year where people were angry and placing protest votes.
Yeah, but that's the point. Is you said that you think that he might, but and I did highlight this yesterday, and I'm hoping that it was a slight oversight. But in his first ever press conference, in that press conference where he said that he wanted to appeal to people who maybe hadn't voted for him or for people who voted for him for the first time, he said that he would be aware of that and should make sure that he brings them in. Yet at the press conference itself, there was no question from GB News, there was no question from the Daily Mail. You know, we can't be playing those games now. We need a stable government that will reflect. Like on GB News, we try to reflect an array of views. We try and give each view equal prominence. That's if they're prepared to come on, like the Labour Party. If they come on, amazing. But you can't be playing these games.
I have to say that was quite a worrying little development there. I think that he's had a lot of flack for that today, and hopefully he's going to pull up his socks pretty quickly and realise that's not going to go under the radar. I mean, obviously, the Daily Mail and GB News, we're not going to just let that fly. So maybe you're right. Maybe this is the first example of him saying one thing and doing another. And we are after, so Keir Starmer, if you're listening, we just want ultimately stable government and for things like the NHS and all the other things to work perfectly. You do that, we're all happy, but I don't think excluding broadcasters from the narrative is a good plan, especially if they may not have supported you, although our viewers supported Keir Starmer.
I entirely agree with that point. It is very important that media diversity is reflected in what the Prime Minister does. But it's also important in the appointments he makes that he recognises he hasn't got an absolute majority of the public at large. He's got a huge range of appointments he can make. He ought to make sure, for example, that people who are very good on Conservative issues are not excluded from government. They can be made chair of something or other. He ought to make sure
he's got Natalie Elphickle, hasn't he?
Well, yes, I know, but she kind of defected in a way. But there's also, I mean, the fact that Lib Dems got a lot of votes, for example, on the issue of carers and on the issue of sewage. I mean, he should be tapping into Lib Dems who know about these things, saying, come and help me with those issues. He wants to have a broad church to recognise that even though the electoral system hasn't delivered that in terms of seats, that the country, in a way, has.
Yeah, and I actually... No, I mean, Liberal Democrats are not a party that I've sort of considered voting for in the past because I think they need both sides of the argument to be somewhere in the middle. They don't actually have their own narrative. But actually, on this occasion, I do feel that there was a conversation and it was about sewage and the health of the nation and I actually really respected that message.
I respected the message, and I respected there was quite a message of kindness as well. You know, it was a real change, a bit of honesty from a leader who just genuinely seemed to care about people and the people that are voting for him. That was a good message, and it was a really surprising and nice thing to see, actually.
I'm with you on that, because I suddenly thought, the Liberal Democrats, they're here.
That's how politics could be.
But it won't be if you have this system of first past the post where one party can dominate with such a small majority or even a minority and half of the country, at least, don't really support.
Well, 2/3 didn't vote for Labour, let's be clear, those who did vote. But, coming back to the PR system, and a point made earlier on about Europe, there are different forms of PR, and if we come late to the game, which we are doing for PR, we can look at what systems there are around the world and pick out the ones that do work. I mean, the Israeli system's a disaster, for example, giving undue power to small minority religious parties. But Scottish MSPs are voted through PR, with a system that keeps a constituency link and then a top-up system to reflect the proportionality. That system works quite well in Scotland. That's the sort of system we could have in England.
Well, you know, that sort of system we can have in England, perhaps, but we said that about we could say that about the health service. We've not managed to pick up any wiser mechanisms in other countries. Well, stay tuned. This is The Clash. It's just coming up to 31 minutes after 3 o'clock. We're live on GB News. Up next, let's get your latest news headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Nana. 3:31, our top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian President that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier on today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart, Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Well, the Prime Minister is beginning a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. First up, Sir Keir Starmer heading over to Edinburgh, where he's expected to meet First Minister John Swinney. The PM says his government will place Scotland back at the beating heart of everything we do. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge now, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said that Rishi Sunak had run a, quote, idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Meanwhile, ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce those immigration numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure, and former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins saying that the country was still instinctively conservative and that Labour's support was, quote, spread very thin, like margarine. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK, former Home Secretary telling us that they lost hundreds of Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She's urging her fellow members of Parliament to decide what type of party they are and, quote, neutralise that threat. England will face the Netherlands in the Euro semi-finals on Wednesday after beating Switzerland in Germany last night. The Three Lions squeaking past the Swiss on penalties 5-3 after the game ended 1-1 after extra time. Prince of Wales was there among football fans rejoicing as England won. He described the match as nail-biting to the very end. Right, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Ray Addison. Tatiana Sanchez will be back in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Coming up in The Clash, were the Labour Party right to scrap the Rwanda policy? Stay tuned, do not go anywhere.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those, but they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us with a few mist and fog patches possible, and underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, so nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week, away from the far north of Scotland where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain. Temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20, 21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday. But it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking more widely unsettled with rain and showers for many of us. Perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely. Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, 37 minutes after 3 o'clock. This is GB News. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome. If you've just tuned in, where have you been? It's fine. We're back. It's The Clash. Now, Sir Keir Starmer says that Rishi Sunak plans to send migrants to Rwanda. The plan is now dead and buried, according to Keir Starmer. Labour are scrapping the policy completely. But is that the right call? Well, joining me now to discuss, Norman Baker and also Charlotte Griffiths. Charlotte Griffiths, is he right to scrap Rwanda?
Well, given that there's zero alternative plan, not really, because, you know, no matter how much you criticise the Rwanda plan, and many people do, there's literally no other alternative. And I'd be really interested to see the numbers this weekend, whether there was an uptick, because I've always been quite surprised by, many of us have done vox pops, you know, the Mail's done it, GB News, with the migrants, and they were actually deterred by the threat of Rwanda, no matter how small, it weighed on their minds. And of course, they were celebrating. They were, you know, there's lots of clips of them on the news this weekend celebrating. So the fact that there's just literally no alternative, you know, maybe they'll make an announcement on Monday. Well, that's already been 3 days of not curbing the boats in any way whatsoever. So I'd like to see the numbers.
Because even if it's the smallest of deterrents, and we proved it through Vox Pops, surely if it works in a way, it should be kept. What do you think?
Well, I mean, first of all, they pledged to abandon it in a manifesto. So, in a sense, he's doing what he promised to do, and he was voted in. So he said he'd a mandate for that particular policy. I think his analysis that the boats were still producing record numbers of people is correct. And it's also the fact that no one has been sent to Rwanda, and the cost of sending them there is going to be equivalent to putting them up in the Ritz. So there's a whole thing,
well, not
lot
really.
of things.
No, hold on, because it's about 8 million a day. It doesn't take many days for it to notch up to well over $500 million, which is what they've sent to Rwanda, and that is a rolling, continuing cost as well.
Rwanda was going to take, I think, just hundreds, and there are thousands coming in. It wasn't going to work.
Well, as a deterrent, if you know, usually with the deterrent, so for example, things like the death penalty and stuff like that, it does actually work, even though people say it doesn't. I mean, if you take somewhere like Qatar, where it's there, some of them have very few low-level murders and things like that because they know they could be killed if they do.
Well, we come on to the death penalty if you like, but I mean...
But I'm just saying that as a deterrent, deterrents do tend to work. It doesn't have to be hundreds of people that are going to be affected by it.
I'm not sure it was a deterrent, but anyway, the point is that it's gone, and what's missing so far from the government, the new government, is the alternative, and I think this is the issue. Rather than Rwanda, which is now history in a way, you said it's history, it's what you're going to do instead, and that's where the focus should be. And it's got to be partly on reforming what the Home Office does. The Home Office has been useless at processing people. People who are processed should either be incorporated to the country if they are deemed to be genuine asylum seekers, or they should be sent somewhere else and got out of the country.
Well, where else would they go?
Well, back to that's where they came from.
Well, yeah, but some people can't be sent back. So, for example, somebody from, I don't know, Iran or somewhere like that, and they fail asylum.
They're the genuine ones.
No, they may not be the genuine ones, but they've come illegally and they've behaved in a manner which we know that therefore they do not qualify, then where do they go if they've got rid of Rwanda? Well, I think that's the problem we have.
We have to separate out the economic migrants from those who are fleeing for their lives.
Well, OK, and that will happen, yes. And then the ones who aren't, we've done that. Now the ones who aren't fleeing for their lives,
then they need to be assessed and processed quickly by the Home Office, which the Home Office doesn't do, and need to be removed if they're deemed to be not meeting the criteria for coming into the country. Yep. That's one strand.
But if they don't meet the requirements, then where do they go if they can't be sent back to their own country?
Why can't they be sent
that doesn't
back?
Automatically mean they qualify just because they can't be sent back to their own country.
Why can't be sent back? Why can't they be sent back?
Well, maybe they can't. Maybe we don't have a returns agreement. I don't know. But there are migrants who can't go back who do not qualify.
Well, the one thing the Glass government did do correctly, in my view, on this issue, was to reach a bilateral agreement with Albania. And the result of that was a whole lot of Albanians were sent back, and the numbers coming from Albania reduced dramatically. That sort of approach is going to be the way forward.
But what about Keir Starmer's border command control or whatever this is? I don't want to laugh because again, I'm hopeful that it would work, but I'm not convinced.
Well, that's one of the many ideas he suggested gently that we're already doing. We're already trying to tackle the boats and the gangs and work closely with the French and tackle the border and create a border command. There already sort of is one. I mean, I don't see armies of Keir Starmer branded sort of officers marching down there being his new border command. It's pie in the sky and it's what's already happening. He's got no concrete thing to suggest, has he really?
Well, I mean, he would probably say that is a good plan and that we are throwing good money after bad with Rwanda, but I would suspect that Rwanda is probably quite a good deterrent because, as you said, there's been plenty of people who don't want to go there and have made it quite clear.
Yeah, I mean, of course he had to oppose Rwanda and get rid of it on day one. Why? That's what he's promised. But he shouldn't have made that promise in the first place without having an alternative, a proper, credible, tough alternative, because so many people didn't vote for him who obviously are very, very concerned about illegal migration and want to hear something from him. So, you know, he shouldn't have got rid of it.
Well, I think Rwanda was a gimmick, to be honest with you, but he needs to have a concrete plan. He hasn't got one, as far as I can tell. But, I mean, let's not forget that the number of people coming into the country, by far the majority of people coming into the country from overseas are people coming in who are approved to come in, not the illegals, but the people who are legally coming in.
Well,
that's the number.
There's a problem with that
too. That dwarfs the numbers coming in by boats.
There's a good number of people who are coming in claiming they're fleeing for their lives, of course, who aren't.
Well, that's true. But equally, when the Home Office assesses them, about 80% of them are deemed to be genuine.
That's a lot.
Well, you know, we can discuss that. Some of your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. Keep your thoughts coming. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. Welcome aboard if you've just tuned in. Up next, Sir Keir Starmer says country first, party second. But is he telling you the truth? Is that right? Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War. Restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. we can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to The Clash. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. It's just coming up to 48 minutes after 3 o'clock. Now, back in June, Sir Keir Starmer said wealth redistribution is not enough to level up Britain, adding working people value success over state support. He's mentioned in many speeches since taking over that the country comes first and the party comes second. But why is he giving out handouts? Dorney Wood, an 18th century house in Buckinghamshire, traditionally used by the Chancellor, and he's now in a dilemma over which mansion to give his Deputy Prime Minister. Right, well, joining me, my panels, Charlotte Griffiths and also Norman Baker. Charlotte, what is this about? He's giving out mansions. Is this normal?
It is. Well, a lot of very senior people get grace and favour places. There's Dorneywood, Chevening and Chequers. And Prescott was famously caught at Dorneywood playing croquet, and it was not a good look because he was supposed to be running the country at the time. I think Tony Blair was in the air on a long flight. So if Angela Rayner walks into this one and gets pictured playing croquet at Dorneywood, I think I'll eat my hat or I'll eat my croquet stick, because surely Starmer won't be foolish enough to allocate her. And there's some suggestion that she might spend alternate weeks there, weekends there. But I just think it would be madness. It's walking into a landmine to let Angela Rayner acquire another home.
I'm not sure why they need to do this. Why are they doing this? Why does that have to happen?
This goes back to the First World War, just about after the First World War, when it was thought that it was important for the Prime Minister of the day and the Foreign Secretary to have somewhere credible to entertain people from overseas. And not all Prime Ministers are hugely wealthy and have their own properties. And they were given to the state in order to enable the Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary of the day to be able to entertain. That's the history of it. So every government of every colour has used these premises. When I was in the coalition, Chevening was shared between William Hague as Foreign Secretary and Nick Clegg as Deputy Prime Minister. I went down there, very nice building indeed. I didn't play any croquet, I might say, but it's a very nice building. So it's not unusual that they will have these buildings allocated to them. There was also Admiralty Arch, and part of the answer for the government may be to do that, because in the Labour government of 1997 to 2010, John Prescott, as Deputy Prime Minister, had Admiralty Arch very close to Whitehall, and that solved the problem as to who had what.
Yeah, because Prescott didn't want to use Dorneywood because he actually disapproved of the lavishness of it.
Yes.
Well, I don't understand why they should have that anyway. They're talking about levelling up and all this stuff. Why should they be? What is the point? Why are they given mansions? I want this to stop.
I actually agree with you. It's such an old-fashioned thing. It harks back to a time when you had these high-profile guests come over and they stayed for a week or maybe 2 weeks and played croquet. But we all know international diplomats, and they don't do that anymore. They're always in a rush. They've got 10 appointments a week. They're not going to be staying the night, and they can use a hotel, can't they?
Yeah,
I think it's important for the Prime Minister of the day to have somewhere secluded in order to have meetings which maybe you don't want the public to know about. I mean, if you get key diplomats coming from different countries, there may be a case for having a secluded arrangement for that. So I think there's a case for at least one of these proproperties somewhere.
Chequers. They should keep Chequers.
Exactly, Chequers.
Dorneywood and Chevening, a bit over the top.
I think it probably is.
I'm sorry, but I find that absolutely... that makes... Well, I'm happy with Chequers just for one of them, but I find the notion that they get a house just because, I don't know, to be there every weekend. And it's not just any old house, it's a mansion. What the hell is that about?
Very salubrious.
I didn't even know that happened.
It's really dangerous as well for Starmer because in these houses, mad things happen. Like Boris had big parties when he... and you just fall into traps because it makes them look like they're sort of lording it up and we're there, you know, going to work on Monday morning.
Yeah.
It's fraught with bad PR, frankly.
It is. It's just not croquet, you might say.
It's not croquet. I like that. It's very good. Yeah, no, I don't get why that should be the case, really.
I spent a long time in opposition, actually, exposing the costs of all these things, and also my colleague Norman Lamb did further information request to find out who Tony Blair had been entertaining at Chequers. And there wasn't people who ought to be in there, quite frankly. It was all of Z-list celebrities who'd been invited there.
Yes, they have parties there for fun. I think Boris did have a birthday party there once. You know, it's not just, obviously, for entertaining important dignitaries. And it's all too tempting to sort of show off to your mates and have them all come round to your country house. But, you know, Starmer's supposed to be all about the people, all about duty. So if he's wise, if he has a good PR team, they'll say, you know, give the properties away for housing, perhaps.
Well, exactly. Give them away for people who need homes, or...
I can't see it actually happening.
Well, you can't do that with... I mean, they are listed buildings, and you can't alter the fabric and everything else, but you could do something else with them,
Well, you could do...
You could make hotels out of them.
Well, no, I don't think...
hotels.
No, because the British people don't get such wonderful accommodation. I don't really understand why that should be the case. I would expect that Keir Starmer will probably get rid of that. I think he should. I don't think any of them should get anything, not like that anyway, and in particular Angela Rayner, because of the whole house thing, and it just wouldn't look good.
Well, all I would say, with due respect to the Mail, and Constance Charlotte's here, is that we didn't have these articles written very much, did we, about Rishi Sunak and all his colleagues using these properties. And 2 days into the new government, we got the article about Labour.
Charlotte.
It's true. I wonder how much Rishi Sunak really used it, though. I mean, he's already got his place in Yorkshire. He's got a lovely place in South Kensington. He had Downing Street. And I don't think that Rishi Sunak was the type to have lavish parties with his celebrity friends.
He probably wasn't, but it may be his Foreign Secretary was.
Well, let's see what some people have been saying. Groucho says... Groucho Marx, it's not really, is it? He says PR won't work for reform, even if they had the highest number of MPs. The other parties would gang up against them. They'd get nothing passed. Ken says... Here we go already. One rule for us and another for us plebs. Jim says, won't take Ange long to be seen in designer dresses and Louboutins, much like the cranky in Scotland. I think she's referring to Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola, please don't take offence. That's what somebody else... I'm just reading out. William says, Britain... what have we got here? Fiona says, imagine Rayner living it up at the weekends at a country mansion. Well, I think this is the risk, isn't it? That's the problem with it. What does it say? Somebody says, Nana, shut up for 5 seconds and let your guest reply to your answers. Really? Did I? Who's that? Stephen Butler. Stephen, I did let them reply. What are you on about? Norman, do you feel I interrupted you repeatedly?
Well, you did interrupt me, but I didn't mind.
You didn't mind. Very sensible answer. Charlotte?
I didn't notice you interrupting me.
It's
all fine.
It's all fine. There you go, Stephen. You'll be happy with that. Well, still to come, the Great British Debate. I'm asking, is it right that Keir Starmer should be clocking off as 6? But first, my niggle. And what's your verdict on the Tories and why they lost?
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to the latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those. But they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us, with a few mist and fog patches possible. And underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week, away from the far north of Scotland, where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south, with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain. Temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20, 21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday. But it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking more widely unsettled with rain and showers for many of us. Perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Summer could be a scorcher, with your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. It's totally tax-free, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
We've been talking about the White House is concerned with playing down concerns about the health of President Biden, who's apparently taken to freezing during public events. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was seen herding the president back into a photo with world leaders after he shuffled aimlessly away from the group. In the last few days, videos and images of the president freezing at a fundraising event went viral, but the White House stated that they were deceptively edited cheap fakes. With me now, again, is my panel, the historian and broadcaster Tessa Dunlop and the associate comment editor of The Telegraph, Mujaz Ahmed. Mujaz, I mean, you are a journalist. What about this idea that in some way the images could be fake?
They could be fake, and some of them will be fake. But the reason these AI images or AI videos or weirdly edited videos are a problem for the White House is that people have seen enough of Biden freezing in real life.
It's not going away, this one. It's perception versus reality, but as Mustafa said, it doesn't matter because it's now become Biden's reality, which is bushfighting, these questions about his ability connected to his age. I don't understand where you go from here. He's got a vice president who isn't presidential material, who I think polls worse than he does, despite these, you would call them ageist. In many ways, it's about his competence, isn't it?
It can make a big difference when the president whose competence, mental competence, is under question, is running on the matter of competence itself. They're trying to paint Trump as being incompetent, as being not presidential, as being unable to lead, while they have a candidate who struggles to get off the stage. Yeah. That's the issue for them. And it's not really about age. He's not much older than Trump, as you say. It's about the appearance of age.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome. It's just coming up to 4 o'clock. This is GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next 2 hours, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, also author and broadcaster Christina Hamilton. In a few moments' time, my niggle, I'll be giving you my verdict on why the Tories lost. And still to come, on my outside section, I'll be joined by an emerging artist known for eclectic mix of musical styles and innovative approach to music production. Then, for clickbait, this is a viral video from this week. Take a look. Well, it might be from next week or the week before or the week after that, but I don't know. But it's a really great video. You've got to stay with me. You'll find out what happens next. It's a naughty seagull. But before we get started, let's get your latest news with Tatiana Sanchez.
Nana, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories this hour from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian President that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Well, the Prime Minister is beginning a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. First up, Sir Keir Starmer's heading to Edinburgh, where he's expected to meet First Minister John Swinney. The Prime Minister says his government will place Scotland back at the beating heart of everything we do. He's also promised to turn his back on tribalism and usher in an era of stability and moderation. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said Rishi Sunak had run an idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively Conservatives, with Labour support spread very thinly, like margarine. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She also said there is only room for one Conservative party in British politics. She's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and neutralise that threat.
Lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Reform. Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives, and they went to an alternative, Reform. So I believe whoever's leading the party, whoever's in the party, needs to acknowledge this basic truth, that we are facing an existential threat from Reform. And we need to change ourselves to ensure that we neutralise that threat, that we bring those people back home.
But Reform UK Chairman Richard Tice told us the Tories have had their chance.
Well, look, I mean, our progress and success has been self-evident for the last 6 months. They all had the chance to join us, to defect to us, like Lee Anderson did. They decided to stay in the existing Conservative tent. And in a sense, there are consequences to people's decisions. They made that decision, and in a sense, they paid the price. That's what competition is all about. I mean, we came second in almost 100 seats across the United Kingdom. We're now the dominant opposition in the north of England to the Labour Party. So we've made huge progress. And I come back, competition is a fundamental Conservative principle. They should believe in it.
The funeral of former Rugby England international Rob Burrow has taken place in Pontefract. The 41-year-old died on June the 2nd after a lengthy battle with motor neuron disease. Today's service coincides with Leeds Rhinos' annual celebration of Rob Burrow Day, marking the number 7 shirt he wore during his rugby league career. Members of the public were invited to stand on the roadside to pay their respects as the funeral cortege made its way to the service. England will face the Netherlands in the Euro semi-finals on Wednesday. That's after beating Switzerland in Germany last night. The Three Lions squeaked past the Swiss on penalties 5-3 after the game ended 1-1 after extra time. The Prince of Wales was among football fans rejoicing as England won, describing the match as nail-biting to the very end. And in France, voters are heading to the polls for the second round of elections, including French President Emmanuel Macron, who cast his ballot. The result is expected to reconfigure the political landscape, with National Rally likely to win the most votes but fall short of a majority. Last Sunday, Marine Le Pen's party scored historic gains to win the first round. They've seen increased support off the back of voter concerns over household budgets and immigration.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, it's just coming up to 7 minutes after 4 o'clock. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Britain under the Conservatives has been a total... I can't say that on air. Let's just say it started out promising and then degenerated into clown world. Because if you don't laugh, you'll cry. Where do I start? Strikes galore. Doctors, nurses, rail, post office, teachers, our roads full of potholes, our rivers polluted, the NHS decimated, and good luck calling for an ambulance. My advice is, if you can, you're better off driving to the hospital yourself. But when you get there, be ready to wait days, only to end up on a corridor. Identity politics has flourished under the Conservatives, who allowed gender identity to embed itself into our institutions. True, it was Sir Keir Starmer who struggled to answer whether a woman has a penis or not, but to be fair to him, it was the policies set up by the Tories that enabled this delusion. Diversity and inclusion, or DEI, and net zero all became a thing under the last government. The latter we can thank Theresa May for. Crime is off the scale, and don't get me started on people carrying knives and machetes. Bills are sky high, not helped by the highest tax burden since the war. And as for immigration, the bit that we could control, legal migration, is completely out of control. And then there's illegal migration. Whilst I support the notion of Rwanda and believe we need a third country to help us out, I couldn't see it happening because of the numerous legal challenges. And all of this at the taxpayers' expense. The smugglers are laughing all the way to the bank. I could go on. There was nothing Conservative about the Conservative Party. They might as well have been Labour. And instead of dealing with policies and focusing on the electorate, the Conservatives spent the last 5 years infighting, changing health secretaries, home secretaries, education ministers, chancellors. I mean, it was just a revolving door of self-serving politicians who appeared to move job every time an important decision needed to be made. Even calling the election was embarrassing. Rishi Sunak standing in the rain with no umbrella, with the tune of "Things Can Only Get Better" in the background, and then he turned around and you could see that he was drenched. All we needed next was lightning to finish things off. And after that, he stood in the Titanic quarter under the exit sign. And what on earth was he thinking when he chose to leave the D-Day commemorations early for a pre-recorded interview on ITV? You couldn't make it up. In truth, it seems most governments, irrespective of party, degenerate into chaos by about 14 years. I mean, take Labour under Tony Blair. By the end of his tenure, we could take no more. I'm not a fan of many of the Labour Party policies, like VAT on independent schools, which I believe hasn't been thought through. I suspect an impact assessment will show it will cause more harm than good, or bringing forward green policies. But I am a fan of stable government. And if Sir Keir Starmer can achieve this, then even those who didn't vote for him, which is 80% of the electorate, will be thankful for at least that. But before we get stuck into the debates, here's what's coming up today. For the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Starmer be clocking off at 6 o'clock on Friday? Before becoming Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer said that he wouldn't work Friday evening to make time to be a dad and to eat with his family. But as the most powerful person in Britain, is that unrealistic? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on Friday? Then at 4:50, it's Worldview. We'll cross live to Los Angeles to speak to Paul Dudridge. He's the host of the Politics People podcast to get the latest on the US presidential election. Should President Biden just step aside, if he can? I mean, is he fit enough to run a country, let alone take on Donald Trump? At 5, it's my outside guest. This week, she's an artist recognised for her striking visual aesthetic, often collaborating with visual artists and designers to create compelling music, videos and artwork. That is coming up in the next hour. As ever, tell me what you think on everything we're discussing. Post your comments, gbnews.com/you're safe. Right, let's get started. Let's welcome again to my panel broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Right, Right, I'm going to start with you, Danny Kelly. The Tories seem... Suella Braverman was suggesting that what they're going to do is they're going to spend time to be introspective and have a look at why they failed. I mean, isn't it as clear as day?
As in reform?
As in why? No, why did the Tory party fail? You think it was Reform's fault?
Oh, without a doubt. I think they would have had another... I think there was some analysis that said they would have had another 180 seats or something. Yes, they still would have lost, but it wouldn't have been as anywhere catastrophic as it is. So they've lost because they've mishandled things, and the perception... Sometimes perception is different to reality, and I don't know whether they've done things as badly as their opponents have said they have done, but nevertheless, mud sticks, and they've been booted out unceremoniously, and it's been incredibly embarrassing. Some big hitters as well have lost their positions as well, which exacerbates the whole situation for them. We're talking major names.
Yeah, like Penny Mordaunt. She carried the sword, for goodness sake.
She did, and Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, of this parish. Yeah. You know, it'll be interesting to see what Jacob Rees-Mogg does now. So it was humiliating for them. Did they deserve it? They probably did deserve it. Yeah. But look, I want to get behind Keir Starmer. I didn't vote for Labour. I'm not a Labour man, but I think we should get behind Keir Starmer. If you... Just a quick one before you go to Christine. If you remember, the opponents of Brexit have never really got behind Brexit. And that's why Brexit may not have come to fruition like we would have hoped for.
And that was the left.
And I'm determined. I think what we should do, no matter whether you're left or right, I think you should now get behind this government and hope it succeeds. It's in everyone's interest.
That's what people would have hoped would have happened with Brexit, and the left would presumably want us to do that. But yet, that's not what they did. Christine.
Well, nobody likes a bad loser, and I think your summary of why the Tories lost was superb. You mentioned just about everything. They brought it on themselves. Yes, reform will have cost them a lot of votes, but reform, I'm certain, like UKIP before it, will not just have taken Tory votes. Reform will have taken Tory votes, Labour votes, and in particular, it will have taken votes from people who have either never voted before or haven't voted for a very long time. They will have re-energised people who had fallen out of love with the political process. So it wouldn't have made any difference to the final result. It would obviously have saved a few Tory MPs from losing their seats. But no, I think the Tories, I mean, they did not deserve to win. I haven't voted Tory since '97, and I didn't vote Tory last Thursday. But Danny's right. I want Keir Starmer to succeed. We should all want Keir Starmer to succeed. We're not going to support everything he does. I want Wes Streeting to be 1,000,000% successful in his reforms for the NHS, and I think he's got a... You know, he's going to do what the Tories should have done by the sound of things. We'll see what he delivers. But of course we should all want Labour to succeed. But no, Danny, again, you're right. You mentioned Brexit. If the people who voted Remain had pulled behind Brexit and said, OK, we lost, but we're going to go for it as a country, we would not be in that particular mess that we're in now. So, no, of course I want Keir Starmer to succeed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do think people who are sort of more aligned to the right are more prepared to get behind things. And just from my observation with Brexit, because Brexit, it was democratically voted for by the people. We had a democratic vote. We decided, massive
only
just that that's what we were going to do. And people did not get behind it, didn't vote for it. Now, I don't like that. I'm going to get behind Keir Starmer because I want stable, successful government.
Exactly right.
If he does something I don't like, then I'm specific about what that thing is. But I'm not really very partisan. It's what the policies are that matter to me.
In my experience, my observations, I may be wrong, I may be right, but people on the left tend to be more ideologically tribal and intransigent and almost spiteful to people on the right. I know that it does go that way as well, but not in such vast numbers. Not in such vast numbers. There seems to be a case of almost hardwiring. People on the left and their intransigence, almost like they're hardwired differently. You know, they're quick to shout you down as being racist, as being xenophobic. They throw all and play all of these cards at you, and you don't really get that the other way around.
Well, I actually had somebody on my show recently who was really, you didn't get you were like conservative. And I thought, I'm not really conservative. I'm not really anything. What I am is, what are your policies? Do they match with how I think? I mean, I've voted for Tony Blair. I voted for Boris Johnson.
Yeah, so did I.
I voted for different people. In fact, across the last 4 elections, I have voted for different people every time. So that,
apart from sorting out the health service and things like that, what I want the Labour government to produce growth. That's what we need. That's what this country needs. We're in a terrible state. We owe money left, right and centre. We're, COVID, etc., and the response to COVID is responsible for a lot of that, and the war in Ukraine, etc. But if we can just get stable economy, growth, then good for Starmer, But whether he'll do it or not, I don't know. I don't know how long his honeymoon will last. Well, look, he's got a big majority does not lead to necessarily to particularly stable government, because there'll be a lot of infighting inside his troops.
If you could pick one moment that you think the Tories went wrong with, what would it be?
Oh, gosh.
The one. I mean, there's just a litany of things, but where did it start?
Oh, I don't. Well, I mean,
what was the worst thing?
What was it? Well, I think the D-Day thing. Admittedly, it was very small, but I think that D-Day desertion of the beaches was appalling, and I think a lot of people just thought, he doesn't get it, does he? He simply doesn't get it.
Yeah.
Or do you mean over the last 14 years?
Let's take the last 14 years.
Yes.
It's D-Day still, isn't it?
Oh, no. Well, the D-Day was the most. It was the final straw, I think, for a lot of people, and then the betting.
The final nail after the other final nail.
Yeah, I mean, they just haven't behaved like Conservatives. Yeah. And I'll tell you who I blame: Cameron. He started the rot when he came in. He made sure that Tory constituencies, were not allowed to choose their own candidates. They had them imposed upon them. They had all these wet behind the ear spads, and they ended up with a load of Liberal, Social Democrat people posing as Tory MPs, and that's why they have gone now.
But some people argue that they're saying, oh, it's the right because the right took over the party, which is why they didn't win. No, they weren't Conservative. No. They weren't right enough.
I think what harmed them, well before the D-Day thing, was Boris Johnson, quote-unquote, partying. And I think Keir Starmer should have been treated equally, by the way, when he was caught drinking a pint and having a curry. But that was decided, and Boris Johnson received some sort of legal consequences to that, as did Rishi Sunak. So I think the public made their minds up, and it was just drummed into them that they were rule breakers, whilst everyone else was having to obey rules. And also the PPI given to that Malone... what's her name? Michelle Mone.
Michelle Mone.
Yeah. And I understand at the time they needed to secure a contract immediately because it was COVID. But nevertheless, the legacy of those... That's what's often parroted by the opponents of the Tories.
But the rolling snowball, hasn't it? One thing after another.
I think COVID harmed them.
But I think some of those things they could have, because it was COVID and nobody really knew what they were doing, they could have slightly...
I agree with you.
...got out of that. But I just think the subsequent behaviours over the last... 4 years in particular, the number of health secretaries, the number of home secretaries...
Matt Hancock harmed.
Matt Hancock, yes, I'd forgotten about him.
That was harmful.
Well, listen, Suella Braverman said they're going to be introspective. Let's hope they don't take too long to decide where they want to go, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to the Conservative Party. But what do you think? gbnews.com/your say. You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. Coming up, Worldview. We will cross live to Paul Duddridge, host of the Politics People podcast, to get the latest on the presidential elections. But next, it's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? I've got a pull up right now on X asking you that very question.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Do you put jam or cream first on your scone? Divisive.
A new study has found that 44% of Brits put jam on before the cream. Which is the right way to eat a scone?
In my opinion, definitely jam first. But I have to say, do you know what? As long as you enjoy it and it's delicious, and you've got nice scone, nice jam, amazing clotted cream, who cares?
Paul, why the jam first?
Because I love that chilled clotted cream that you hit first, then into that room temperature jam, and then that lovely baked scone.
And one of our viewers has written in and said actually she puts the jam on first because otherwise you would get it all over, as in it would wobble off on the top of the cream.
But I think it's easy to dribble the jam onto the cream. You're not spreading the jam onto the cream if you put it on top.
I would do jam first because it just seems to make less mess. So the jam spreads easy and then just a dollop of cream on top.
Is there much of a market for the savoury ones that you have?
Yeah. You know, like when you're frying onions for a hot dog, like fairground onions, fold that through your scone mix, bake your scone, so you've got this lovely kind of like roasted onion scone mix.
Dawn isn't into it.
Braised beef, clotted cream, horseradish and watercress.
Oh, my word.
Absolutely incredible.
Well, you're very adventurous, Paul. Very adventurous.
Yes. But think of it, you know, like when you make beef stew and you put those scones, drop scones on top, like a beef cobbler.
Yeah.
It's that inspiration.
Well, I would call it like a dumpling.
Well, do you think very quickly, do you think these will become a classic?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. Because I think there's just so much more to clotted cream, scones than just the traditional cream tea.
GB News, the People's Channel. Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Good afternoon. It's fast approaching 23 minutes after 4 o'clock. Have you just tuned in? Where have you been? No, it's fine. You're fine. It's not the full half of the show, so you're in for a good time. Right, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. It's time for the Great British Debate this hour, and I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 o'clock on Friday? That's what he said before becoming Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer said he wouldn't work Friday evening to make time to be a dad and to eat with his family, which is all very lovely, isn't it? But as the most powerful person in Britain, is that realistic? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? Well, I'm joined now by former Liberal Democrat Minister Norman Baker, Editor-at-Large of the Mail on Sundays, Charlotte Griffiths, and also Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, Gary Mond. Gary Mond, I'm starting with you. He said he's going to clock off. I know he's got Jewish connections.
He's complying with Jewish tradition in not wanting to work on Friday evening. But those Jews, the Orthodox Jews who don't work Friday evenings, and they don't even work Friday afternoons during the winter time because Shabbat comes in so early, they work full days on Sundays. Is Sir Keir Starmer offering to work a full day on a Sunday? Because that would be consistent with the view of taking Friday evening off.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think, Charlotte?
I bet you he will end up working on Sunday, and definitely past 6 p.m, but I think it's so nice for Lady Vic, his wife, that he's got these lovely ambitions to come home. I mean, of course, in answer to your original question, it's totally unrealistic. Yeah. And I remember, I've just come back from maternity leave, I remember saying, oh, I'm going to come home to the baby. But, of course, once work takes over, you forget all about it and you're just sort of nose to the grindstone at your computer. So I don't think it's actually going to happen.
Norman Baker.
When I was an MP and a minister, I used to work about 65, 70 hours a week. And I think he'll be working more than that every week.
Yeah.
And he's going to be more balanced and more sensible as a Prime Minister if he's got family time to spend with his wife and kids. And we shouldn't take that away from him. Of course, if something happens on a Friday which is significant, like, you know, a major event, a terrorist attack or something, of course he'll be working on a Friday evening. He's not going to suddenly knock off in that situation. But if he wants to spend time with his family, good luck to him. So he should.
Well, I think he said come what may, actually. So he's quite so serious about it. Look, but the point of it is that is this... I mean, you know, it's like going to a job interview and then saying, oh, no, I'm not going to work here, there. He will have time with his family, but doesn't specifically be at a set time every week.
It has to be within reason. And don't forget an additional point, and that is that as Prime Minister, he's going to be paid quite a lot more money than backbench MPs. It's expected of him to work more. And while I certainly would not deny him time with his family, it has to be within reason. And Friday, if he wants to take Friday evenings off to have a Friday night dinner in the traditional Jewish style with his family, that's fine. But I would expect to see him working on Sunday, on the other hand.
Do you think? I'm very interested to see whether the civil service would be working on Friday afternoons, because we all know they like to work from home. They're still on lockdown hours. I can't imagine there's a huge amount of civil servants that are still in at 6 o'clock on a Friday.
But also, he's dealing with international time zones, so it's not quite...
Well, he is. I mean, and no doubt he'll be phoning Joe Biden or whoever the American president is at odd hours. Look, I mean, when I was a minister, there were civil servants who were working odd hours. Those in my private office, those who were very close to ministers were working odd hours. So it's not true that the whole civil service knocks off. You know, my private office was working the same hours as I was working much of the time.
But post-lockdown, you've got to admit that they're a little bit more prone to finishing early.
They should be in the office more. I agree with you. But this is a storm in a teacup. He will do whatever he has to do in order to deliver his duties as Prime Minister, I think. And if there's some major event on a Friday, he'll be in working working in Downing Street, but he should have some time with his family, and we shouldn't begrudge him.
Yeah, but I think that you're equating people saying, hold on a minute, you can't be set and specific with what time
Well, what about
and when, with not having time with the family.
What about Christians who go to church every Sunday? We say, I go to church every Sunday, people might say. Should we say that's knocking off for that? No, we would just expect that's part of the normal week.
It's sort of the weekend, though, isn't it?
What's it's Friday evening?
Not really. No, it isn't. No, but it's
he
the weekend.
He really does have to comply with the demands of the job.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a role which requires almost 24/7 attention. And if he didn't want to give 24/7 attention to it, he shouldn't have stood to be Prime Minister in the first place.
I think he will give that.
I think it was a good hard and fast rule in opposition, but clearly he's got to adjust his expectations now, hasn't he?
No, I don't know. Maybe that is his expectation. And he's saying, come what may. They have a massive majority now. I suppose he can do what he likes, right?
I believe so. With 410 seats, he hasn't got any problems in that area. Although, of course, there could be trouble within the Labour Party. He might find in the course of the next 12 months there are rebellions against his policies from the Labour Party, and that will certainly take up his attention if it happens.
I mean, one of the main ones that I know there's sort of opposition within the party is obviously the VAT on private schools, which hasn't gone down well. Even the OBR has said that it may not bring in the money that they're expecting, and if so, it might actually cost the taxpayer. I mean, that one, the unions are already up in arms about it as well, aren't they, Gary?
I think the biggest issue will be the so-called Palestine issue.
Do you think?
Within the Labour Party, yes. There's a lot of left-wing Labour MPs who are sympathetic with the cause for Gaza, mistakenly in my view, of course. But that is the fact, and that is something that Keir Starmer will have to deal with over the course of the next year.
Do you suspect, Norman, that the Labour Party might find themselves in lots of different factions, just like the Tory party? And if so, how soon do you think it's going to kick in? There's obviously a honeymoon period.
I think factions is a too strong way of putting it. But I think...
Do you think?
Yes, but I think there'll be, of course, 412 Labour MPs are going to be with different priorities. Some will be focused on Palestine, as not least of all because their constituency is concerned about it. Others will be focused about the health service. I mean, others will be focused about sewage and the environment. I mean, nothing wrong with that. And the issue is whether Keir Starmer gives them this freedom, if you like, the space to express their views within a coherent party, or whether he tries to organise them so they can't say what they think, and they're not independently minded, and that's not welcomed, or whether, in fact, that leads to factions if people try to shut up other members of the party.
But sorry.
Well, all of these are great examples of how many flare-ups can happen on any day at any time.
Exactly.
Sure. And at that point, say there was a big problem with one of the marches, he's just going to have to down tools at home and just drop everything and be on it. And so these are all great examples of why he's completely unrealistic to think he can finish at 6.
But the fact that he even said it... Well, the fact that he even said it, though, just that shows a bit level of naivety, surely.
Yeah, it does a bit. And actually, the way he said it was so boorish and sort of, I'm going to do things my way. It does actually sort of worry me that if that's how prescriptive he is about everything, there might be some trouble ahead.
I don't think he shouldn't have said come what may. He said
come what may. He did say that, yeah.
But, I mean, apart from that, I mean, the idea he wants to spend time with his family on a day that's important to his religion seems to me to be entirely laudable.
Yes, entirely laudable. Is it realistic, though?
It is laudable that he should try to, but as you say, the words come what may are not acceptable in this context when you're Prime Minister.
Well, that's a lot of people won't see it that way as well, because a lot of people have to work on a Friday and they can't just go, oh, well, I'm not going to do it come what may. If the boss asks you to do overtime, you do overtime.
And the one aspect I completely reject is the Jewish tradition aspect with regard to Sundays. But on Sundays, a lot of religious Jews who would keep Friday night and keep the Shabbat work on Sundays. Indeed, they even work on Saturday evenings during the winter when Shabbat goes out early.
I will lay you a bet, not a Conservative bet, by the way, the sort of that resolve in advance, but I'll lay you a bet that he'll be working on Saturday and Sunday.
Well, he said, his words were, we've had a strategy in place and we'll try to keep it, which is to carve out really protected time for kids. So on a Friday, I've been doing this for years. I will not do a work-related thing at 6 o'clock, pretty well come what may.
Pretty well.
There are a few exceptions, but that's what we do.
Well, he says he's been doing it for years, but he wasn't running the country in years gone by, so he'll just have to adjust that. I mean, who can begrudge a man for caring about their kids? It's a nice, noble aim, but it's not going to happen.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's nice that everyone cares about their kids. I mean, the majority of sensible adults care about their kids, and I'm sure everybody would like to be able to say, I'm going to down tools now every Friday. But I don't think it's realistic. Gary, do you think it's realistic?
No.
Well, Norman Baker, do you think it's realistic?
I think pretty well come what may is better than come what may.
It's very vague, isn't it? Pretty well, come what may. He's a master of not sort of fully giving you an actual answer.
He was probably trying to win over the wives and mothers, out there, possibly like myself, who thought, oh, that's nice. He wants to look after the kids. Isn't that sweet? But he probably didn't really mean it if he said pretty well, come what may.
Yeah, exactly. And, of course, he was obviously trying to win over the Jewish community, I suspect, as well.
Yeah.
Well, once again, I think Orthodox Jews would ask the question that I've just asked. Will he be working on Sundays?
To make up for the Friday. Well, what do you think? gbnews.com/your say. Do you feel that saying, come what may, I'm going to work, I'm not going to work, do a work-related thing after 6 o'clock on a Friday, especially when your Prime Minister is realistic? Or are we being unfair? You're with me, I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with the Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel. Also, my outside guest is on the way. We'll be talking highs, lows, lessons learned and what comes next. She is a singer, songwriter and very famous for striking visuals and her eclectic mix of musical styles and innovative approach to music production. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian president that recognising the state of Palestine as part of the Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is beginning a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. First up, Sir Keir Starmer is heading to Edinburgh, where he's expected to meet First Minister John Swinney. The Prime Minister says his government will place Scotland back at the beating heart of everything we do. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said Rishi Sunak had run an idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively Conservatives, with Labour's support spread very thinly like margarine. Suella Braverman said the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and neutralise that threat. And England will face the Netherlands in the Euro semi-finals on Wednesday. That is after they beat Switzerland last night. The Three Lions squeaked past the Swiss on penalties. 5-3 they won that after the game ended 1-1 after extra time. The Prince of Wales was among football fans rejoicing as England won, describing the match as nail-biting to the very end. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Tatiana. Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, Worldview. We will cross live to speak to Paul Duddridge. She's there in LA and get an update with the latest news on the US presidential race. But next, we continue with the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? And I've got a poll up right now on X asking you that very question. Should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? Tell me what you think. Cast your vote now.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those, but they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us, with a few mist and fog patches possible, and underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week, away from the far north of Scotland, where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south, with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. Feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain, temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20-21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday. But it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking more widely unsettled with rain and showers for many of us. Perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. If you just tuned in, welcome to GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? Before becoming Prime Minister, Keir Starmer said that he wouldn't do a work-related thing on a Friday, something that he'd been doing before and didn't want to do it now. So just to make time for his family and all that kind of thing. But as the most powerful person in Britain, is that unrealistic? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, should Sir Keir Starmer be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday? Right, so joining me to discuss, my panel, author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Right, I'm going to start with you, Christine Hamilton.
Well, he's obviously taking a lead out of Rishi's book, who clocked off early from the D-Day beaches, didn't he?
Very good.
No, I think it's a noble ambition, given that he's married to a Jew. And Friday is their big day, big night. So I think it's a noble ambition, but I think it's incredibly naive. I don't think he has yet possibly realised exactly what's going to hit him. I don't think he'll be able to do it, but I think it's a noble ambition. I mean, Margaret Thatcher, for example, she worked until 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
She then got up at 6. She did another red box. She cooked breakfast for Dennis. Then she had her hair done, and then she faced the world. She'd been up for sort of 2, 3, 4 hours before everybody else started stirring. So I don't think he'll be able to stick to it. And obviously, if he goes home at 6 o'clock on a Friday, who takes over? No wonder Angela Rayner, the ginger growler, wants to be Deputy Prime Minister, because she'll then be on duty from 6 o'clock every Friday evening. But I think, why not? Nobody dies wishing they'd spent more time at the office. His children deserve him. His wife deserves his time. So I think, as I say, it's a noble ambition, but I don't think he'll achieve it very often.
Yeah, because
and why shouldn't he have Friday from 6 off if he's then going to work all day Sunday?
But you don't need to tell everybody that as well. I mean, that is also a very foolish thing to do. Listen,
well, I think
if you haven't said anything, don't need to say anything.
I presume, I'm not his spokesperson, I assume he wants to come over as a family man, which he obviously is.
No, or maybe he's trying to get the Jewish vote. I don't think...
Well, maybe he was...
because you wouldn't say that. Why does he need to tell everybody that he's not going to work from 6 o'clock on a Friday? If you're not going to do that, do it quietly, because obviously you're going to have people going, you're the Prime Minister, you can't set a set time.
I think that's an automatic reaction. I think that was his automatic reaction instilled in him with his hardwired socialist ideology. Like a lot of unions will want people, once they clock off, that's it.
Yeah.
If your boss rings you up or emails you, you're not getting paid, clock off. And that's instilled, that's hardwired into the lad. I think it was a foolish thing to say, because a lot of Labour voters, if someone rings them up or they get an email from the boss at 9:30 on a Friday night, they think, oh my God, and they feel compelled to answer it because they're worried about their jobs and everything. I don't think it's got anything really to do with, but this is just a personal opinion, I don't think he was, if you like, pandering to the Jewish faith.
You don't think so?
I don't think so, no. I just think it was an automatic reaction that's hardwired into him, that at 6 o'clock on a Friday night, because all the other Labour voters aren't getting paid to work, so why should I? I think there was just that sort of train of thought.
It's nothing to do with that. It's nothing to do with people not being... It's nothing to do with... He's paid to do a 24/7 job, and all he was saying is that I want to carve out this particular time, which is precious and special to my family for reasons, because his wife is Jewish, and that's what they've always done. That's all he was saying. I don't see anything wrong in that. I just think it's naive to think he's going to be able to do it.
You may be right, but I also may be partly right in the sense that, you know, when people clock off, that's it, they clock off, and that's part of the Labour ideology. It's part of socialism, that you should only be rewarded for the work you give to other people. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying maybe it's partly...
I think possibly he shouldn't have used the word clock off because of the reason...
Did he use the word clock off?
Well,
no.
Did he not?
He said we've had a strategy in place and we'll try to keep it, which...
Oh, he didn't? Well, that's fine then.
Carve out really protected time for the kids on a Friday. I've been doing it for years. I will not do a work-related thing after 6 p.m. pretty well come what may.
I don't understand his mentality. I mean, I've worked 24/7 ever since I started working, since I left university. I mean, you take your time off when you can, but you do not have, especially in politics, which is where I've spent so many years, you do not say, I can't do this and I can't do that. You work Saturday night, Sunday night,
is that
whatever.
all of his supporters are saying, look, all the Tories are saying that if there was a Russian bomber flying over Scotland... But he said...
so stupid.
Of course, it's a ridiculous analogy. But what he said was anything. So, like, I'm in the car business. It's like me saying, after 6 o'clock, Danielle rings you up, Dan, I've had a complaint, the fella wants a new tyre, it's 6:05. I ain't talking to you, it's 6:05. You know, there could be some trivial things that the Prime Minister needs to give answers to.
Yeah, well, he said...
Russian bombers.
No, but he has said, if I have to, I will, or words to that effect.
He said there are a few exceptions, but that's what we do.
I do think people have overreacted, and I think that, you know, people have tried to make such a big thing of it. Oh, he's only going to be a part-time Prime Minister.
That's ridiculous.
Rubbish.
Well, no, I think a lot of people just seeing it in looking at their own circumstances and asking whether they themselves could go, I'm not going to do another work-related thing until 6 p.m, and they're probably thinking that, well, it's pretty unrealistic. So,
it is unrealistic,
as the Prime Minister, I mean, he's already out and about today as well. He's working hard today.
His health minister is just about to ask the NHS people to do more overtime and work weekends.
I just think he needs to have a look have a think about how it might come across. But this show's nothing without your views. Let's welcome our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show. Tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got John Reid in Kidderminster. John, he's not going to work. Work-related thing, 6 o'clock Friday. Yeah, that's it.
I can't get my breath, Nana. We witnessed a revolution last week, didn't we? The going, thank God, of 14 years of pain, and the new boy is now in the job. He's been in it 3 days. He's made some really important changes. He's doing stuff today that nobody ever did before him. And here we are talking about whether he can have Friday nights off. Well, it's just a topic that's got no merit. We should be talking about the good things he's doing.
Which are, he's only just got in. What's he done that's good?
What he's done in my world that's good, Nana, he's revolutionised the thought process that goes into the prison world and what we're doing in there, because the last government has just, words fail me, but it's a mess, isn't it? Everyone accepts the criminal justice system is a mess. We're locking up way too many people for way too long, and there are so many people that could do something about it. And thank God he's put James Timpson in there, because there's a man with he'll revolutionise it and change it. I've met James, I know him a little bit. He's a good man, and he'll change it. And this has been coming for a long time.
Yeah, well, he said he would change it, but he said that prisoners will do, what is it, a quarter of their sentence. I don't know whether, you know, I mean, he might be right. Look, I don't know, but I'm glad that people who understand the narrative are being put in the positions that they should be. And listen, I'm with you. I want to see success, and if he succeeds, good on him. Thank you very much, John Reid in Kidderminster. Lovely to talk to you. Thank you. That is John Reid. He's our great British voices. You're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, live on TV, online and on digital radio. On the way in the next hour, my great British debate. I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? But next, Worldview, we'll speak to Paul Dudridge, host of the Politics People podcast, and find out what's going on in the US.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we've got quite an extraordinary story to talk to you about now, because a triple amputee war hero is launching a bid to become the first to sail across the Pacific Ocean non-stop, solo and unsupported.
Craig Wood was blown up as a teenager by the Taliban in Afghanistan, but now he's hoping to change the perception of disabled people and raise money for other limbless veterans like himself. And Craig joins us now. Morning.
So, Craig, you are extraordinary. You are planning to take up to 80 days to sail from La Paz in Mexico to Japan.
Yeah.
How many miles is that?
It'll be over 6,000.
Amazing.
Amazing. And it will take you how long?
The minimum it's going to take me is 60 days. It could be up to 80. Yeah.
And that's on your own. You've done plenty of this before, haven't you? You've done lots of solo sailing.
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of solo sailing, but not as big as this. It is the world's biggest ocean, after all.
And why that particular route?
I wanted it to be a challenge, not just for me, but for anyone.
Right.
So any able-bodied person can look at this and go, wow, that is difficult.
Yeah.
And so that was the main drive. Then it's become a bigger thing than that now. Now I'm raising money for charity, and I can truly inspire people to change their perception on what is possible for disabled people.
And if you don't mind, can we ask you what happened in 2009 in Afghanistan? What were the circumstances of your injury?
I was on a normal routine foot patrol. About 5 metres in front of me, a commando IED was triggered. And subsequently, I became a triple amputee. Both legs above the knee, left hand at the wrist, facial injuries, etc., etc.
The People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time for Worldview. So let's cross over to America now and have a chat with the host of the Politics People podcast, Paul Dudridge. So, Paul, let's see. So let's start. Where should we start with? Joe Biden insists that he's not going to be dropping out of the race. What?
Yeah, he insists he's not dropping out of the race. He insists he's not dropping out of the race. And some people are paying him attention still. So expect him to be dropping out of the race any minute now. That's basically what we're saying. But no, he did a fiery interview with ABC the other night to sort of quell all the rumours about his decline, and I think it lasted all of 21 minutes, and the questions were pre-arranged. So, yeah, he's going to go. It's not now a question of whether he moves aside. I think you said it's like whether he's even capable of stepping aside. It's not a question of whether he steps aside. Now it's going to be how they do it and when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a clip of this this thing that you were talking about. Should we play a bit of that clip because we can get to see how Joe Biden behaved? Let's take a listen.
This is the White House Situation Room, getting to connect Prime Minister Starmer to President Biden. You are now connected to Air Force One.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Prime Minister, congratulations. What a hell of a victory. Congratulations.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's been a long night and day. I've been busy appointing my cabinet during the course of this afternoon. So thank you very much for your congratulations. And fortuitously, we will see each other next week. I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in Washington and having the opportunity, obviously, to sit down properly.
I'm looking forward to it as well. There's no doubt that under your leadership, our two countries are going to continue our special relationship. We're working together just about every issue, supporting Ukraine, managing the competition with China, advancing cooperation in the Indo-Pacific with AUKUS.
Firstly, the special relationship.
So that was Keir Starmer having a conversation with Joe Biden. I mean, it could have even been an AI voice or like a soundy likey. I mean, what's that? That was
well. It was good of Biden's handlers to interrupt his nap time to speak to the new Prime Minister. Talking about Keir Starmer with his 6 o'clock, Biden said in this interview that he needs more sleep and he's now going to clock off at 8. So he's he's got a bedtime as well. Most powerful man in the world, and he clocks off at 8 o'clock every day. That is, so it's not even just Friday. Yeah, it's looking like I said. The question is now, when are they going to actually replace him? Who's going to replace him is now the question. It's kind of Kamala Harris is now being floated, even though she's losing to Trump in the polls in any hypothetical election. She's losing, but it looks like because of the funding of the Democrat Party, that legally it has to be somebody from that administration. Otherwise, there is going to be a whole legal to do about. Hang on, we donated to the Biden campaign. You can't. We want our money back. So this is all getting very, very interesting. But yes, get ready for a new president. You've got a new prime minister. We're going to be getting a new president soon.
Well, Joe Biden said he wouldn't commit to an independent cognitive test. That's a bit concerning as well. He said he was not going to do that.
No, even better, even better. He said, I take a cognitive test every day. Doing this job is the cognitive test. And we're all going, yeah, that's the point. That's why we're asking for a cognitive test. It's the way you're not doing this job every day is why we're sort of suspicious and would like a professional to intervene. So he's had physicals, but they do not include cognitive tests. It's like, okay, well, bits of your body are working. We get that. And you can be lifted everywhere. I don't want to be unkind. But yeah, his retort was, I do a cognitive test every day. And we're going, yeah, I know, we've seen it. We've seen the results. That's why we're worried.
Yeah. And what about President Trump? How's he getting on?
Well, last week I told you he was going to be sentenced. He's not going to be sentenced now this week. He's supposed to be sentenced on July the 11th. The Supreme Court have come in and gone like, yeah, no, you can't do that. He's like the president, and anything he did while he was president has got the presumption of immunity. And so the sentencing itself is going to be delayed, possibly forever. And now the other documents case, the actual federal documents case, you know, where he's supposed to have taken documents and all that, and the January the 6th, all these kind of things where he's implicated as starting an insurrection or whatever, could all just melt away because it looks like whilst he was acting under the authority of his presidency, you can't touch him. And so a lot of the legal stuff is going to fall away. We're only going to be left with I think, the E. Jean Carroll case, and that's it. And that's going to go up to appeal eventually. So he's being exonerated left, right and centre.
Well, of course, they're realising that he's probably going to be in power. Paul Dudgeridge, always brilliant to speak to you. Host of the Politics People podcast, Worldview as ever. Then at 5, it's my outside guest. She's an artist recognised for her striking visual aesthetic performances. She will be live next.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those. But they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us, with a few mist and fog patches possible. And underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week, away from the far north of Scotland, where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south, with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. Feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain. Temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20-21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday. But it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking at more widely unsettled, with rain and showers for many of us. Perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£30,000 in cash has to be won. It's our biggest cash prize so far, and it could be yours. Phil was a winner. Listen to what he says about winning the Great British Giveaway.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox. I just looked at my account and thought, oh my God, yeah, it's true, it's gone into my account. And if I can win it, anybody can win it.
The next big winner could be you, with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So the royal family is opening the doors of Balmoral Castle to the public and giving guided tours today for the first time in more than 170 years.
And one man who spent plenty of time there is former royal butler Grant Harold, who joins us now. Grant, we know the Queen loved Balmoral, and that's, of course, where she was in her final days. Why was it so special?
I think for many reasons, but most importantly, it was a family home, and it's where she spent a lot of time with her family. I mean, we all know the Queen, obviously monarchy was the first thing, but she always said that family was right behind that. And so time with family was important, whether it be at Sandringham or Balmoral, which were both properties that she privately owned. So they're private homes and very special.
Which kind of makes it even more surprising that King Charles has decided to open the doors to the public.
I was surprised when it was announced, because for many years, I've always said that Balmoral's one of the most private homes. You know, they've always been quite fierce about keeping a private home, private estate. You can visit the gardens at certain times of the year. You can see the ballroom as well. But to actually go in the rooms is really a big step for them. And I think it just shows you that the kind of future of the monarchy with properties is opening the doors and letting the public in to see them.
Yeah. Now, you had a very special occasion in that ballroom, because you saw a film in there, but I'm actually interested by who you danced with in that ballroom.
In the film that I watched, the documentary, it was the Queen dancing, and I remember thinking I would love to dance with the Queen. And about 12 years later, I was in that ballroom and got to dance with her in that room. So it was quite...
Was she in her full tartan regalia?
She was in a beautiful dress. She had a blue dress on, which similar to what she wore in the documentary that I saw. And they actually replicated the scene in The Crown. Right. I was very disappointed to see that Brad Pitt wasn't playing my sadly.
How unfair. GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of the big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course, it's yours. So coming up at 5, it's my outside guest. Now, she's an artist, recognised for her striking visual aesthetic, often collaborating with visual artists and designers to create compelling music videos and artworks. Haven't given you much of a clue, but I'm sure you'll be very excited when you see her. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? Then, for clickbait, I'll be showing you a viral video from... have a look at this. A seagull going through a shop. But what happens next? But first, let's get your latest news.
Nana, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian President that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is beginning a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. First up, Sir Keir Starmer's heading to Edinburgh, where he's expected to meet First Minister John Swinney. The Prime Minister says his government will place Scotland back at the beating heart of everything we do. He's also promised to turn his back on tribalism and usher in an era of stability and moderation. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said Rishi Sunak had run an idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively Conservatives, with Labour's support spread very thinly, like margarine. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She also said there is only room for one Conservative party in British politics, and she's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and neutralise that threat.
Lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Reform. Millions of our voters were betrayed and angry with the Conservatives, and they went to an alternative, Reform. So I believe whoever's leading the party, whoever's in the party, needs to acknowledge this basic truth, that we are facing an existential threat from Reform. And we need to change ourselves to ensure that we neutralise that threat, that we bring those people back home.
But Reform UK Chairman Richard Tice told us the Tories have had their chance.
Well, look, I mean, our progress and success has been self-evident for the last 6 months. They all had the chance to join us, to defect to us, like Lee Anderson did. They decided to stay in the existing Conservative tent. And in a sense, there are consequences to people's decisions. They made that decision, and in a sense, they paid the price. That's what competition is all about. I mean, we came second in almost 100 seats across the United Kingdom. We're now the dominant opposition in the north of England to the Labour Party. So we've made huge progress. And I come back, competition is a fundamental Conservative principle. They should believe in it.
Thousands of people lined the streets today to pay their respects to former Leeds Rhinos rugby star Rob Burrow. The funeral took place in Pontefract for the England international. The 41-year-old died on June the 2nd after a lengthy battle with motor neuron disease. Today's service coincides with Leeds Rhinos' annual celebration of Rob Burrow Day, marking the number 7 shirt he wore during his rugby league career. England will face the Netherlands in the Euro semi-finals on Wednesday after beating Switzerland in Germany last night. The Three Lions squeaked past the Swiss on penalties 5-3 after the game ended 1-1 after extra time. The Prince of Wales was among football fans rejoicing as England won, describing the match as nail-biting to the very end. And finally, in France, voters are heading to the polls for the second round of elections, including French President Emmanuel Macron, who has also cast his ballot. And the result is expected to reconfigure the political landscape in France, with National Rally likely to win the most votes, but still fall short of a majority. Last Sunday, Marine Le Pen's party scored historic gains to win the first round. They've seen increased support off the back of voter concerns over household budgets and also on immigration. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 6 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua. And for the next hour, me and my panel will be taking on some of those big topics hitting the headlines right now. This show is all about opinion. It's mine, it's theirs, and of course it's yours. We'll be debating, discussing, and at times we will disagree, but no one will be cancelled. So joining me today, it's journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, also author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Now, still to come, each Sunday at 5, I'm joined by a celebrity, a former MP or someone who's had an extremely interesting career, to take a look at life after the job. We talk highs, lows and lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today my guest is an artist recognised for her striking visual aesthetic, often collaborating with visual artists and designers to create compelling music and art videos and things like that. I can't give you any more clues than that because otherwise you work out who she is. Then, for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? It says the Prime Minister was reportedly reopen negotiations with the EU and apparently wants some more relaxed freedom of movement rules. Really? So for the Great British Debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think that Sir Keir Starmer will attempt to reverse Brexit? As ever, get in touch at gbnews.com/yoursay.
Blown away coming in here.
Right, so every Saturday and Sunday actually at 5, I'm always joined by an incredible guest. And this time, my guest is someone who's had an extremely interesting career. We talk highs, lows, lessons learned and what comes next on the outside. And today, well, she was born in the early 2000s. She's a baby, little young lady. My guest grew up, see, because I'm so old, that's why. Now, my guest, I think she's half my age. My guest grew up in a musically diverse environment, which significantly influenced her unique sound, with blends and lots of different types of electronic and indie and pop music, alongside music that she's recognised for this wonderful visual aesthetic. She does works with a lot of designers and creates incredible music with videos. But can you guess who she is? Well, she's singer-songwriter Rara Leavesley. So I've got Rara Leavesley.
Rara.
It's Rara Leavesley.
Rara, yeah, that's my birth name, Leavesley. So.
Yeah, but you're known as Rara.
Yeah, everyone calls me Rara. It's actually my little niece Florence, when she was about 4, she gave me the name Auntie Rara, and then it just stuck with everybody.
Well, it's quite good, isn't it? It's like N-A-N-A-R-A-R-A.
Yeah, Nana and Rara. Yeah.
No. So listen, Rara, talk to me about you, because you are very talented. You've got a fabulous voice, and we will get to hear a little bit of your music in a moment. So everyone will wait for that. Please wait for that. But talk to me about why you came into what you're doing.
OK, so I've been a singer-songwriter for most of my life. I started singing from a very early age in the back garden, singing to Gina G.
on a cassette. Remember the cassette days? And I just always wanted to be like a diva. And I think I remember writing a letter to Top of the Pops once asking, can you make me a pop star? So I probably got it somewhere still. But yeah, but I've always loved music. It's, you know, it's my passion. It's my, you know, it's kind of what I live and breathe. I love writing. I started singing first. I got into writing just towards my 20s. I actually started writing charity songs. And I think the big ballads kind of taught me how to write a structure of a song, and I went into, you know, being a cover artist, so travelled the world doing that.
You travelled the world, really?
Yeah, I lived in China a few times, which was interesting.
What was that like? Because a lot of people hear about China and we think, oh,
yeah. China.
Right.
Do you know what? It is another world out there. Like, I mean, I had a fabulous time. It was great experience for me. I was young.
But you're still young, you're very...
Yeah, I know. I know. But I think it just kind of like really built my onstage experience. So learning how to perform and sing to lots of crowds and things. And,
yeah. Now, of course, your partner is Charlie Mullins.
Yes, yeah.
He would have been here today, but he couldn't come and...
No.
He's busy.
Yeah.
You know, how did you guys meet?
So it was actually in Spain, in Marbella. So I actually lived in the Middle East. I had, you know, a business over there in Dubai, and I was vocal coach, and I was writing songs for Emirati artists, and I also had my own rockabilly outfit, the Cherry Bomb Gang. So I put that together. First rockabilly band.
A rockabilly band.
Yeah, rockabilly. So it's like 1950s style music. But what I had to do, because Dubai was actually formed in 1972. They wouldn't understand what rockabilly was, so I had to kind of make it a vintage band and actually put covers over the top of a rock and roll outfit. So it was a really, really cool time for me, but then COVID hit, and then I ended up in Spain because I was visiting some friends I used to live with in Dubai. And then I bumped into Charlie on the beach because I thought it was a Rod Stewart tribute. So
it was a Rod Stewart tribute.
Because I'm a musician. So, but yeah, that's how we met. And yeah, I think, you know, the journey's just, you know, been incredible since then.
Yeah, so you have released your own single.
Yes.
Is it on a record label or is it your own label, I'm guessing?
Yeah, so
it's
taken me a few years to kind of get to this point, and because the industry is forever changing, but we are very much now in the digital world, so the platforms are kind of open to everybody. And I kind of made the decision, I came away from being managed, and I kind of put myself into my own apprenticeship last year. I think it was about August, September. And I actually got some help from a lady called Kimmy from Hypertribe, who actually helped me set up my own record label and told me how to run it, essentially, and how I could release my music, sign myself to my label and do it myself. So big thanks to Kimmy. And I'm working Blind and Talent PR as well. So they do a little bit of artist management just to get the kind of brand like together. And so all of us all together have... You know, they have been a big part of releasing this single, which I released on Friday, called Sweet Hurricane. So, oh, it's so exciting. I'm so, like, you know, I'm over the moon because it's been such a long, hard journey.
Well, shall we have a listen to it then?
Yes,
Let's have a listen.
Yeah.
Introduce your song, Rara.
OK, so this is Sweet Hurricane, which was written by myself, Ant Whiting and Emily Phillips.
All right, let's play it. That's really good.
You look a bit 60s today.
Thank you. Yeah, I dressed up this for you because I knew this dress would be that kind of thing. Yeah, that's a lovely song. I love the sound of that. Yeah. It's quite funky, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, you know, I wanted to release my first single as a really, like, dancey, uplifting one. You know, it has got a little bit of a 60s influence as well. I want to bring that authenticity back. I want to bring that era back a little bit in a modern day time. And the video comes out on Friday as well, so that's, you know, less than a week.
So we here on GBNews got the first sound of it on any sort of proper broadcast. Oh, good. So we've got very lucky.
Yeah.
Had a short clip of it for you to all hear it. It's out on Friday. Yeah, so if people were looking for that and wanted to download it, or where can they find it?
So you can go to raraofficial.com, so you can find all my platforms on there, all the links. You can find the premiere of the video on there, where you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, and it will premiere like 5, 4, 3, 2 days, 1 day, and then it gets released.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Well done you. See, that's quite entrepreneurial, innovative to do it yourself.
It's a lot of work, but the rewards are brilliant.
That's
and
good.
I do recommend, like, to music artists, if they can do it themselves, then go through the pain a little bit and learn how to do it yourself.
Learn to do it yourself.
There's so much out there now. There's actually a lot of support out there as well. Like Hypertribe is a brilliant support platform for musicians who want to make money in the industry, because it's very, very hard to make money in the industry.
I can imagine it is very difficult to make money.
It's a very good support platform, and then find a good PR team and just find your tribe, actually, because there's not many people that are part of your tribe in this business. So,
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Rara, you've got another song coming out. When is that going to be released soon as well?
Yeah, so I've got 2 more coming out this year, and then I'm actually looking for a collaborator to write a Christmas single as well. So,
with your collaborator.
yeah, I think that would be cool, actually. Yeah, 'cause we've spoken about that before, but I've got one.
Song.
Yeah, Christmas song. Yeah, we've got to start soon, though.
We're going to start writing. Right.
September the 6th, I'll be releasing It's Not Fair. And I wrote that with a guy called Blair McKitchen, who is responsible for writing The Greatest by Sia and Stone Cold Sober by Paulette
Oh, wow, so you've got some good people behind you now, yeah?
Yeah, he's a brilliant personality, but I actually recorded it in Memphis, so I went to Memphis, and it's a brilliant story how that happened. I actually went to Nashville and then ended up on Music Highway down to Memphis at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, and then I ended up with Al Green's performing band.
Wow,
so they were the recording band behind him.
Right, well, listen, Rara, we will look forward to hearing your single out on Friday.
Thank you so much.
Sweet Hurricane, is it called?
Yeah.
Did it all by yourself? Good job.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, lovely to see you. That is Rara. Rara Leavesley.
I know, right?
Just
But
Rara. Leave it at
Yeah.
Rara. Thank you so much, Rara. Lovely to talk to you. Take care. Good luck. Good luck. Right, well, if you just tuned in, welcome. You've just missed the music, but don't worry, you can download or get hold of her album, her song, actually, on Fridays. Sweet Hurricane. Right, it's coming up to 17 minutes after 5. This is GB News. Coming up, clickbait. Have a listen, have a watch, have a look. It's actually a seagull going in through the electric doors of a supermarket and jumping onto a sandwich shelf. But what happens next? Stay tuned to find out more. And I'm asking in the Great British Debate this hour, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? This is GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Royal Academy's annual exhibition has returned for the 256th time to Brighton the summer holidays. It's the world's oldest open submission exhibition. Anyone can enter work to be considered for inclusion. I'm joined now by art critic J.J. Charlesworth for his verdict. What is your verdict?
My verdict is you should go and see it. You are confronted with many things of varying quality, selected by artists, and you very much, instead of being given something to you that's supposed to be good, you have to make your own decision.
I went along yesterday, and I personally did see some pictures on the wall that I thought were absolutely stunning. I'm going to mention Peter Ucker, which I think is a remark. And now these are the two by Ben Jonson, Grundtvig 1, and we've got one coming out of Berlin Pool. I think that's an absolutely stunning piece of work. And then Claire Douglas should be up. Here we are, Claire Douglas.
Yes.
Souvenir from the Anthropocene.
Yeah.
That last one, actually, a very witty painting.
piece like that was really interesting. I think it caught a lot of people's eyes because it had very kind of humorous, slightly bleak take on post-Brexit Britain. It's set in this fictitious world of Brummington, which is a sort of loose satire on Birmingham. I thought it was a bit mean.
I think we had maybe Black Lives Matter. We had Boris Johnson. I think our own Jacob Rees-Mogg made his way into the painting.
Yeah, so there's definitely a slant, a political slant, on the part of the artist. But even that said, I thought it was an interesting and enjoyable work, even though maybe you don't agree with the artist on what they're trying to say. And I think that actually made for an interesting moment because you're seeing that people are disagreeing, right? Both through the artwork and in front of artworks.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, just coming up to 21 minutes after 5 o'clock. This is GB News. We are live on TV, online and on digital radio. I'm Nana Akua, and it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? I mean, do you trust him? It's as the Prime Minister will be reportedly reopening negotiations with the EU and apparently wants a more relaxed freedom of movement rule. I mean, is that true? Does he really want that? And then, so I'm asking you, do you think that Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? Joining me now is political commentator Benedict Spence, Deputy Leader of Rejoin the EU, Richard Morley, and former Leader of UKIP, Neil Hamilton, and then Chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Sensen. Welcome. Well, I'm going to start with you. Benedict Spence, what do you think? Do you trust Keir Starmer with his hand on the pulse for Brexit?
I think there's no doubt that Sir Keir Starmer and certain tendencies within the Labour Party would like for us to have a closer relationship with the European Union. I'm certain that many of them would like us to rejoin the European Union. I don't think that he is foolish enough to go too fast too soon, so to speak. I think he understands that the thinness of his majority in several seats, not as an overall number, but as in several key seats, will make a lot of MPs rather jumpy about pushing too hard on anything particularly controversial for the first couple of years of his premiership. I think he will then, feel out actually where the public are sitting in a couple of years' time and whether or not he can chance his arm. I do think that they will move to create closer ties on certain things. I think freedom of movement may be one thing that they look to change. I think certainly things like border control, military cooperation. I think as eyes sort of look westwards towards the United States and question mark raised over whether or not Donald Trump would want the US to play such a key role in the defence of Europe, I think that will be something that they certainly look to forge closer ties on Europe with. But I would say, as much as there are many people within the Labour Party that would definitely, no question, would definitely like there to be a close relationship and perhaps rejoining, he has said it's not going to happen this time. Angela Rayner has said it's not going to happen this time. I think Keir Starmer is too savvy to upset the apple cart on that and reopen the whole issue, which, let's be clear, would give more succour to both the Conservatives and plenty of succour to reform.
Interesting. Greg Sensen, what do you think? Keir Starmer flip-flops on many things before when he was in opposition. Now he is in the chair of power. Do you think that he can be trusted with Brexit?
I think he can be trusted with it. He's stated that. I don't think he could. I mean, it's one thing to flip-flop on issues or even renege on some campaign promises, but I think it would just be way too extreme for him to try that, given what he said recently about we will not rejoin the EU in my lifetime. I think that's something that will stick with him.
Yeah. But if these people say one thing, do another.
He is a politician, so you have to assume that there will be a lot of flip-flopping. But and he doesn't strike me as someone with conviction, and that's probably a good thing. If he was a Marxist like his predecessor in the party, then you might expect something really radical.
You mean Jeremy Corbyn? If
Right.
he was like Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Let's go to Neil Hamilton. He's a former leader of UKIP. Neil.
Well, I don't think they can even contemplate returning to the EU formally. because that would require another referendum, which they're certainly not going to give. But I think that what might happen is we'll get what's called dynamic alignment, which means that we will follow EU regulations even though we're not in the EU. Of course, the Tories have done almost nothing to the advantage of Brexit. We've diverged in a very, very limited way from the corpus of legislation, much of which we voted against, but were voted when we were in the EU.
Neil,
and that's,
your sound is going in and out. Can you sit back a little bit further away from your microphone? Because I think you might be too close, so it's doing a feedback. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so I think the problem is that we've hardly left the EU anyway. Northern Ireland is still formally part of the single market effectively, and we've got a border down the middle of the Irish Sea. And Mr Starmer isn't going to do anything to disturb that. And I think that Labour will just carry on this dismal route that we've followed under the Tories, not taking advantage of the freedoms that they can bring.
Yeah. All right, let's speak to Richard Morley, Deputy Leader of Rejoin the EU. Richard, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the new Foreign Secretary explained it very well when he said that he was embarking upon the first of many stages to attempt greater integration with the EU. And I think that's the best way of looking at it. Yes, of course, it is not right for him to attempt to rejoin it at the moment. There is no mandate for him to do so. Moreover, it isn't actually possible for Britain to simply rejoin the EU in a single leap. It has to go through, as the new Foreign Secretary has explained, through a series of stages which gradually increase that integration, that trust, that degree of cooperation, so that rejoining or joining the single market, for example, becomes then a possibility. At the moment, we're in the very early stages of renewed European alignment, and I think that everything is on course for us to go further.
Because Rishi Sunak sort of alluded to this, that there's no way that there'll be any sort of further integration without freedom of movement and actually allowing some of the EU rules, even if we don't rejoin. Greg, do you think that Sir Keir Starmer may well start to try and relax things and then bring on freedom of movement in exchange for closer alignment kind of thing with the EU?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this will be not quite rejoining, but in effect rejoining, if they can tick a bunch of boxes about, that increase the cooperation. And so, yeah, I would think it'd be almost like a stealth rejoining.
Yeah. Benedict, do you think that that's really where we're going with this one, that we might not officially rejoin, but we will be so in tuned and aligned we might as well be in it?
Well, we already had a trial run of this during the last mayoral race, London mayoral race, where actually many of the talking points that were raised by Sadiq Khan were very much more sort of pro-EU than Labour have been coming out with. And, as London tends to go, you can just imagine actually how the Labour Party will feel that if these things are positive, it will be able to pursue them at a more national level later on. Whether or not that's correct or not is by the by. That's what they'll inevitably do. And you can already see how they'll frame it. It'll be for young people, it'll be for skilled workers, and it'll be sold also as a possible route of getting large numbers of migration from around the rest of the world down, if only the sort of the trade-off, if you like, is having more migration from the European Union. So I can see that they would do that sort of thing, see if it plays well. But I also think Neil's right in that actually, when we talk about Brexit is something of an illusion. It's all very well leaving the European Union and putting up trade barriers if you then keep a large swathe of the regulation that Europe already gave you and you don't sort of take advantage of the opportunity to do away with that. So, it's one of those things where I suppose really the Labour Party will be looking at this and thinking, OK, politically, as Greg says, it's difficult to get away with. Actually, the idea of rejoining or sort of massive, certainly official signings, treaties, that sort of thing, saying, yes, that's it, we're going to have greater alignment. But a lot of the framework is already there, and it's just going to be a few things tinkering around the edges and things that they feel that they're able to sell to the public whilst not being actual rejoining, but in fact, in reality, being aligned.
Richard, I'm going to ask this one to you because a lot, there's talk of closer alignment and everything else, but Europe appears to be swinging further to the right. Is that really where we want to be aligned, in this country? Because obviously they're going further to the right. A lot of European countries now seem to be electing more right-wing, right-of-centre governments.
Well, you must remember we may have a Labour government with a 2/3 majority, but it only had a 1/3 share of the vote.
Yeah.
And one can fairly say that the whole of Europe, if not other parts of the world as well, is drifting towards right-wing politics in view of the enormous degree of crisis that faces every country on the planet as well over the coming decades. And I think it is a fear that many people have that we will move too far to the right. And of course, these are alarm bells for centrist politicians to get their act together and realize it's only by working together with other nations, not only in Europe, but internationally as a whole. It's only by working together with other nations that we can solve the global crisis that faces us all over the next 20 to 30 years.
But you don't have to join them in a way, as it were, and back into the EU. Greg, do you think that with freedom of movement, because if they do have the exchange and we do get a closer relationship, it'll be to accept more people, I suspect more migrants into this country. I mean, America is in a mess over all of that.
Right. I think if they make it easier for people to move here legally, and whether that's 100% freedom of movement, but they have to deal with the boats first. They have to deal with the immigration crisis. It's no different in America, where it's really going to be difficult to talk about changing immigration policy or going back to freedom of movement if they don't deal with the crisis at hand.
Yeah. And final word to you, Neil Hamilton. If, say, Europe does move more towards the right, would you still object to kind of joining them, as it were?
Well, they won't want us to join. I mean, these countries are moving in the same direction we did over Brexit. The same reasons we left Brexit are causing the political changes that we're now seeing over the Channel. They want more control of borders, which the EU got rid of through the Schengen Agreement. And they want to see the centralisation of power in Brussels removed and go back to the nation states. So I want, of course, international cooperation with other countries in the EU as well as outside it. What I don't want is for us to be part of some kind of a federal union, which is what the EU bureaucrats in Brussels have been trying to move us towards for the last 50 or 60 years. So the nations of Europe are waking up to the realities that we've confronted already. And so I very much welcome the political changes that are taking place on the continent of Europe now. And I hope that we can create a looser union across the Channel, and one with which we can trade freely.
Brilliant. Neil Hamilton, thank you very much. Benedict Spence, thank you so much. Deputy Leader of Rejoin UK, Richard Morley, and also Chair of Republicans Overseas, Greg Svensson, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks, Nana.
Right, you're with me. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, we'll continue with our Great British Debate this hour. I'm asking, do you think that Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? You'll hear the thoughts of my panel, journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly, also author and broadcaster Christian Hamilton. But first, let's get your latest news headlines.
Nana, thank you. The top stories. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian president that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is an undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. The Prime Minister has begun a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. Sir Keir Starmer has been in Edinburgh today, where he's vowed that Labour will deliver for Scotland. The Prime Minister's two-day trip will also take him to Northern Ireland and Wales. Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said Rishi Sunak had run an idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively Conservatives, with Labour support spread very thinly like margarine. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and neutralise that threat. And some breaking news this hour. A man and a woman have been charged with murder after the death of a 14-year-old girl in Darlington. Police and paramedics were called to an address shortly after 11 o'clock on Friday night. The girl was pronounced dead at the scene. Simon Vickers and Sarah Hall, both from Darlington, have been charged. They are due in court tomorrow. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, coming up in clickbait. Right, there's a I'm about to call it a swan again. It's not a swan, it's not a duck. It's actually a seagull going into a supermarket through the electric doors. What happens next? But next is time for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit?
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those. But they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us with a few mist and fog patches possible, and underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. So nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week, away from the far north of Scotland where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. Feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain, temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20-21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday. But it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking at more widely unsettled with rain and showers for many of us. Perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
Sunday nights on GB News. From 6, Neil Oliver. At 7, it's Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle. At 9, Mark Dolan. And at 11, get set for the week ahead with headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome on board if you just tuned in. Where have you been? There's only 21 minutes to go. I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. And it's time now for the Great British Debate this hour. And I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit. It's as the Prime Minister will reportedly reopen negotiations with the EU and apparently wants a more relaxed freedom of movement ruling. Really? So for the great British debate this hour, I'm asking, do you think Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? Do you trust him not to do that? Let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined by author and broadcaster Christina Hamilton, also journalist and broadcaster Danny Kelly. Danny Kelly.
Well, it was freedom of movement that basically caused the Brexit result. So people who remained, I'm speaking generally, enjoyed the freedom of movement for them to travel and live abroad, and the people who voted Brexit didn't enjoy the freedom of movement, where people from mostly Eastern European countries, if you look at the highest Brexit vote, was in the towns, the Lincolnshire towns like Boston, 70-odd%. Now, they were affected by mass Eastern European immigration. So that tells you all you need to know. Or were the Eastern Europeans just unlucky to move into a town mostly populated by mad racists and xenophobes? Of course not. It just shows that when you have mass unfettered immigration, it causes an impact.
Well, it creates racism.
Of course. It does. A cultural change that people aren't happy with. So that's the impact of freedom of movement. In 2019, the Lib Dems campaigned, they were explicit. If we get in, we will reverse Article 50 and we will stop Brexit. So they had 11 seats. There's not that appetite out there to stop Brexit and reverse the European Union. Otherwise, everyone would have voted for the Lib Dems. They got 11 seats. This time around, they've got about 60 or 70. He's not going to do it. He can't do it in 5 years. And if he does go in that trajectory, in that direction, he's got reform snapping at the heels. And that's why a lot of people are saying that this is a Conservative Labour Party, because they're going very right. And also, one of your contributors, I think it was you, Nana, Europe is going to the right.
Exactly.
Europe's going to the right. The horse is bolted. You can't rejoin something like that.
Christina Hamilton.
No, 100%. Of course you can't. And it would be deeply undemocratic. This country voted to leave. And we have left. We haven't done it very successfully, but we have basically left, and there's no turning back. That's that. It wasn't just immigration, though. It was, for a lot of people, me included,
correct.
It was sovereignty.
And
it was getting our own sovereignty back, so we could have our own rules, etc., etc., and we weren't judged by ruled by unelected judges, etc., etc. So, no, I think it'd be very, very foolish to try and do it. But undoubtedly, he will try and tinker at the edges, and I'm sure there are things that could be smoothed out. But I think if he starts to go against the democratic will of the country, he'll be in deep trouble.
Well, also, the Schengen is not really... I mean, obviously, we wouldn't be in Schengen because we're not within that thing, but it would be still freedom of movement. And with the current situation with migration and also all the illegals crossing borders and things like that, I don't think... a lot of the trajectory is the other way around. Europe are trying to close borders.
Yeah.
Within each other.
I was speaking to a Latvian guy the other day, and he was talking about freedom of movement. Fabulous guy. He's been in the United Kingdom for 10 or 12 years. A great guy. And I asked him how many Brits are in Latvia. He didn't know the answer because he'd never seen one. Same as Poland. Same as Poland. How many Brits have taken advantage of the freedom of movement and moved to Poland? This country is if you like, is the mecca of Europe, in my opinion. You know, it's one of the greatest countries on the planet. It's got the greatest football, it's got the greatest music, it's got the greatest culture. Look at London, it's a fabulous... It is a magnet, it's a draw.
It's very nice of you to say something good about London. Most of the time...
But from their perspective... No, but from like an immigrant's perspective, it's Mecca, it's the magnet. And that's why... And Farage is right, you know, it's the exponential growth of population, which hasn't been mirrored in certain other countries. So people want to move here. People don't necessarily want to move to Poland or Latvia.
Of course they want to come here. I mean, they're not mad to want to go somewhere else. They want to come here also because English is the lingua franca, and it's the easiest language. It's the main language of the world. So a lot of immigrants would be immigrants. Half speak English anyway to start with. But they can't possibly do it. They, as I think it was Danny who said, or somebody said, that they would have reform absolutely snapping at their heels. And the rest of Europe doesn't want closer integration. France doesn't want closer integration. Italy doesn't want closer integration. And let's see what's happening today as France goes to the polls and see where Marine Le Pen goes. She doesn't want closer integration, so he'd be mad to try.
Well, that'll be fascinating to see what happens with France, but there's shows nothing without you and your views. So let's welcome some of our great British voices, their opportunity to be on the show and tell us what they think about the topics we're discussing. I've got 4 of you. How amazing. Right, Julie Shaw. Julie in Bridlington. Julie, what do you think about this? Do you trust Rick here not to reverse Brexit?
No, I don't trust him at all. Far from accepting the view of the people when the referendum, he was one of the most ardent protesters against it, and he was demanding a second referendum. Germany's government have announced that they're in talks with Keir Starmer as soon as he was elected, about making moves closer to the EU for the UK. But I think he'll do it bit by bit. He won't dare just go all out and announce that he's going to do it. I think he'll take us in little increments. He's always said that we'd be better governed by the EU and take their powers.
Yeah.
But he'll do it in small steps. I wouldn't be surprised if he don't put the bill Theresa May facilitated customs arrangement back on the table.
Do you think? He might try. Let's go to Dan. Dan, Brian and Hull. Dan.
Of course, hello. Some would say that there's an argument to suggest that we haven't left the European Union at all, given that we've still got freedom of movement for everybody coming here. We're still part of their tax laws. We're still part of the European Court of Human Rights, and we're still part of the European Court of Justice. We still have to abide by all these rules. So we simply do not have the Brexit that people asked for. But then again, what did that Brexit look like? How do we know what's been tinkered with around the edges, as Christine so eloquently put it? And also, if you have the other side of the argument, if he did want to take us back in, what would we be going back into? Because the EU looks like it's collapsing.
Well, let's go to Alan Cook. Alan.
Hiya, Nana. Well, I think he's definitely going to try and take us back in, but it won't be via the front door. You know, Blair, Brown and Mandelson are famous for basically doing things via the back door, and I think that's his only option at the moment. But I think our only hope, really, is going to be the fact that the hard left of the party, the Corbynites, actually don't want us to be involved with the EU because they can't create their communist utopia if we're ruled by a foreign nation.
Let's go to Mark Sheridan in Chester. Mark.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what's been said. He's going to reverse, but he's got to realise, as it's mentioned, Europe is no longer the same. And I think with the elections in France, you know, it's going to be harder for people to come to the UK because they'll man their borders. And, you know, let's face it, 17 million voted for Brexit to control our borders. Now, he's coming out with these words of freedom of movement. For all we know, he might stop the boats, the dinghies, for safety. They might have Labour cruise liners.
I don't mind if he's got cruise liners and they're sort of lining in the middle of the channel, stopping people from coming any further, then I'd accept that. Julie Shaw, thank you very much. Dan, Brian, Alan Cook and also Mark Sheridan. Lovely to talk to you. Those are my great British voices coming up. Clickbait. Have a look, have a listen. That is a seagull going into a supermarket via the electric doors. What happens next? Next, though, Supplement Sunday, my panel and I discuss some of the stories that caught their eye. Stay tuned.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Prince Harry, he's been opening up about the death of his mother, Princess Diana, while speaking to the founder of armed forces charity, Scotty's Little Soldiers.
Well, the Duke of Sussex joined 50 children who were being supported by the charity and urged youngsters to open up about their grief, saying, if you suppress it forever, it will eat you away inside.
Well, let's speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who joins us in the studio. Cameron, Prince Harry has spoken quite a lot about grief and bereavement from his mother's passing and the trauma he had. Did he say anything new that we haven't heard before?
And the difference here was, instead of kind of talking about himself, which clearly we've heard a lot of in the last 3 years from Prince Harry with his memoir Spare and the Netflix series, I could go on, he was putting the spotlight back on the charity and on Nikki and her story. So it was almost like having the old Prince Harry back, and also thinking about like what could have been if he didn't step back as a working member of the royal family.
That's so fascinating. In many ways, he was sort of stepping into his old role in this. It was sort of performing a duty that he would have done back before the days of Megxit.
It is kind of like before the days of Megxit. He's been heavily involved in the charity for a good decade now, but when he came back for the Invictus Games celebration commemorations of the 10 years of Invictus last month, he spent time with 50 or so children, and he talks about how first instinct of a child when they lose a parent in awful circumstances such as that is, I have to be really sad for the rest of my life. And he talks about how those children who've lost parents through conflict feel like that, and how actually it's okay to be happy again later on in life when you've had the support, and realising that the parent you've lost would want you to be happy later on. So that's the message Prince Harry was trying to get across here.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon. Welcome to GB News. We're live on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, here's something that caught my eye in clickbait. Have a listen to this. So this is a seagull going into a supermarket via the electric doors. They've opened the automatic gates. He can't open it, but he waited for a passerby to go in and then flew in. He's clearly been observing for a while. He's now on the supermarket shelf and has pulled off a packet of sandwiches. He's pecking into the sandwiches as well. And then I think he goes back on the shelf for another one. Yeah, and now he's pushing it towards the electronic doors. He's actually pulled 2 off the shelf. Now he's waiting by the door for somebody to perhaps step in front of it to activate it. And somebody stepped in front of it, activates it. He's now leaving the store with his sandwiches. But somebody is actually trying to chase him to take it off him. Oh, what is this? Let him have it. Why? What's the point? You can't have it. So that's the seagull. Ingenious, isn't it?
Shoplifting is catching.
Well, it seems to be. Well, you don't get arrested for it. Right. Well, let's move on now, because it's time for Supplement Sunday, where my panel and I discuss some of the news stories that caught their eye. Danny, what have you got?
Well, you may remember a couple of weeks ago there was a cow that was mowed down by a police car. It was on the loose, yeah? Caused a lot of division in how people feel about it. But anyway, so this is what happens if 45 cows escape, and there's a snappy little headline about move out of the way. Cows stampede down Suburban Street in Yorkshire Town. So this young lad, 18 years old, heard this commotion. 45 cows.
Oh, wow.
Not just one. 45 cows escaped a field and ran down this high street. And guess what? Not one cow was injured. The cops, the local old Bill, helped round it up with the farmer. And that's how you do it, rather than just mow them down in a police-marked 4x4. All 45 cows survived. They survived another day. They're currently probably in an abattoir, the irony of it all.
Oh, no.
I know, yes. So anyway, there's some great video of it, but the noise of the clatter of these hooves down the high street's brilliant.
That's incredible. Right, Christine, what have you got?
Well, for those who don't know, there's a television series called Midsummer Murders, which centres on homicides committed in the villages of the fictional county of Midsummer. And over its 140 episodes, there have been 388 murders, 423 deaths, etc., etc. Anyway, in their wisdom, ITV have now slapped a content warning on this, saying that it may contain violence, may contain some crime scene images. I mean, if people watch something called Midsummer Murders, what the heck do they expect? Except murder, crime scenes, and also some partially naked autopsy scenes. Bodies being autopsied, if that's the right.
Well, that's what you get if you watch that sort of thing.
I mean, how woke do you? I mean, it's just this whole thing is just about. It's ridiculous.
No, I found this, and this was somebody who tweeted, and they said, "Dear reform racists," which is really out of order. 4 black England players have just scored perfect penalties. If you're jumping up and down celebrating, then there's some swearing. Okay, so this is this woman who's. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't even know what colour the people were that scored the goal, so I replied, "The only racist is you. What has scoring a goal got to do with the colour of someone's skin?"
And did they reply to you?
Funnily enough, no.
And was the author of the tweet black?
No, I don't think so.
Oh,
no.
it's just mental.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's just so lazy. The conflation between racism and just a party that wants to keep an eye on the borders. It's just crazy. I'm sorry, but that woman is hardwired. She's mental.
Well, that's what we get from that. And then obviously she's not going to herself, but she's going to put things out on Twitter like that, or X, what can she expect? Well, listen, on today's show, I've been asking, do you think that Sir Keir Starmer will reverse Brexit? According to our Twitter poll, 60% of you say yes and 40% of you say no.
Wow.
And then I asked you whether you think Keir Starmer should be clocking off at 6 p.m. on a Friday. According to our Twitter poll, 30% of you said yes, 70% of you say no. No, he shouldn't be. Interesting. Well, I'm with you. I don't think he should, not specifically at one time. You can clock off when you get spare time, as and when. I've got to say thank you so much to my panel, broadcaster and journalist Danny Kelly. Thank you very much, Danny.
Thank you.
And also to Christina Hamilton, author and broadcaster. Thank you, Christine.
Pleasure, as always.
And as ever, thank you to you at home for your company. Next up, it's Neil Oliver. I'll leave you with the weather forecast. Take care. Have a fabulous week. I will see you in Britain's newsroom on Friday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. We've had some showers around today and they'll be continuing on as we head into this afternoon and evening. Some of them still on the sharp side for the next few hours or so do just watch out for those, but they'll be easing their way off as we head into this evening and overnight. Quite clear skies for many of us, with a few mist and fog patches possible, and underneath those clear skies as well, temperatures will be dropping their way off quite a bit. A chilly night for the start of July. Towns and cities still around 9 to 11 degrees Celsius, but rural spots perhaps even as low as 3 to 5 degrees Celsius, so nippy to start off the new working week. But for many of us, particularly the northern half of the UK, it will be quite a bright start to the new working week. Away from the far north of Scotland, where there will be a bit more cloud around, some outbreaks of rain and drizzle in there. But certainly for much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, there will be some sunshine to kick off the day. A few showers eventually developing as we head into the latter stages of the morning and the afternoon. In the south, though, we are going to be watching as this rain slowly pushes its way in. It will be turning quite bleak and gloomy for southern areas of England and eventually into southern Wales as well later on. And the rain will slowly push its way in from the south, with some brisker winds developing, perhaps 30-35 mile an hour gusts along the southern coast of England later on into the afternoon. Feeling quite cool underneath that persistent cloud and rain, temperatures perhaps not climbing as much as 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. But further north, where we see the sunshine, actually might see 20-21 degrees Celsius. That's more around where we should be for this stage of the year. The rain in the south is all due to this area of low pressure that is sweeping its way in from the southwest. It is going to make very slow progress northwards as we head throughout to the end of Monday and eventually into Tuesday, but it will be eventually moving its way into Wales, and then as we move into the overnight period, Northern England, Northern Ireland and potentially Scotland later on. So certainly from Tuesday onwards, it's looking more widely unsettled with rain and showers for many of us, perhaps a little bit drier as we head towards the end of the week, Thursday onwards. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Summer could be a scorcher, with your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date. It's totally tax-free, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Question is, should our museums stay free for everyone and anyone, or should we be charging our tourists?
So many of the artifacts are from around the world, stolen actually,
I think it's almost to add insult to injury to ask people to pay to see the artifacts that were taken without their permission. One of the things that the museum set itself up for is a kind of World Heritage where you can see the stuff they took from your country free of charge, because the British state's willing to do that. Is one of the reasons why we hold on to many of the artifacts from around the world instead of giving them back.
I mean, that's a noble argument, Wayman, but none of the other countries in the world that also contain artefacts from all over the world indulge in that, do they? We still have to pay to see anything that's come from the UK that might be overseas?
No, but the absolute truth is that we've stolen a lot more over many more years than anybody else, because we're a very, we had a very, very big empire, and during that time, taking things from other countries without their permission.
And I think our wonderful country, the United Kingdom, is the cradle of modern civilization, not of the ancient world, but of the modern world. You know, for centuries, we've contributed things to the world, which has spread out around the world, and the influence that we've put upon countries around the globe has been massively significant. I think it's a privilege for people to be able to come to this country and track the history of our country through our museums. I can't understand why they've ever been free. The upkeep of museums runs into hundreds of millions of pounds a year. Somebody's got to maintain them and keep them good. Somebody's got to go around the world and collect the artifacts which are in our museums. And I've always had the adage in life, if something is free, it's probably not worth having.
The People's Channel.
Good evening. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has told the Palestinian president that recognising the state of Palestine as part of a Middle East peace process is undeniable right. Sir Keir Starmer spoke to Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. He also spoke to his Israeli counterpart Benjamin Netanyahu, setting out the clear and urgent need for a ceasefire. Labour's election manifesto committed the party to recognising a Palestinian state as part of a process that results in a two-state solution. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has begun a UK tour as he tries to reset the relationship between Westminster and the devolved nations. Sir Keir Starmer's been in Edinburgh, where he's vowed that Labour will deliver for Scotland. Sir Keir says he'll use his talks with First Minister John Swinney to set the framework within which we can work better for Scotland. The Home Secretary has set out the first steps to establishing a new UK Border Security Command to strengthen Britain's borders and tackle criminal smuggling gangs. Rapid recruitment for a leader used to working in challenging environments, such as the levels of policing, intelligence or the military, will kick off tomorrow, with the new recruit expected to take up their post in the coming weeks. Yvette Cooper says a major upgrade in law enforcement is needed to stop illegal channel crossings.
No one should be making these dangerous boat crossings. This is undermining our border security as well as having lives being put at risk. But that's why we have to have a major upgrade in law enforcement, and I have immediately started the work on that in the Home Office. That includes the recruitment of a new border security commander, the establishment of a new border security command, and also the recruitment of new cross-border police, including to work right across Europe to tackle this problem at source.
Likely contenders in the Tory leadership battle are starting to emerge, using newspaper articles and interviews to say what they think went wrong. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman said Rishi Sunak had run an idiotic strategy and needed to take a tougher line on reducing immigration. Ex-Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick said failing to reduce numbers was our biggest and most damaging failure. And former Health Secretary Victoria Atkins said the country was still instinctively Conservatives, with Labour's support spread very thinly like margarine. Suella Braverman says the Tories are facing an existential threat from Reform UK. The former Home Secretary told GB News they lost hundreds of brilliant Conservative MPs because of Nigel Farage's party. She also said there is only room for one Conservative party in British politics. She's urging her fellow MPs to decide what type of party they are and neutralise that threat. But Reform UK Chairman Richard Tice told us the Tories have had their chance.
Well, look, I mean, our progress and success has been self-evident for the last 6 months. They all had the chance to join us, to defect to us, like Lee Anderson did. They decided to stay in the existing Conservative tent. And in a sense, there are consequences to people's decisions. They made that decision, and in a sense, they paid the price. That's what competition is all about. I mean, we came second in almost 100 seats across the United Kingdom. We're now the dominant opposition in the north of England to the Labour Party. So we've made huge progress. And I come back, competition is a fundamental Conservative principle. They should believe in it.
And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning and welcome to the Camila Tominey Show. As they say, a week is a long time in politics, and it's been one hell of a week. We have a new government and a Prime Minister, a huge majority, but now he has to deliver. After their big success at the election, I'll be asking the newly elected MP, Richard Tice, Chairman of Reform UK, what his party plans to do to win over more voters over the next 5 years. That will be exciting. So too will my interview with the woman who could put herself forward in the running to replace Rishi Sunak, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman. She's been very outspoken in the Sunday Telegraph today, so I'll be asking her about that. Is she the person who can turn the Tories' fortunes around in opposition? I'll also be joined by a political panel to dissect what she had to say and analyse Labour and the policies, not so much that they've announced, but that they've scrapped yesterday. And author Peter Caddick-Adams will be here to share why he thinks that the recipe for Winston Churchill's success during his wartime premiership of 1940 to 45 can be found in the First World War. Now we're going to have a panel discussion. We love a panel on GB News, don't we? And I'm joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Laza and political correspondent for The Spectator, James Heal. Hello, chaps.
Good morning.
You recovered?
Just about. Today's the first day of feeling human.
I know. You
Just
were saying you didn't expect on Thursday night to be in what seemed to be a former strip club with Darren Grimes.
It was absolutely with our wonderful viewers,
which we loved,
which were fantastic. But I'm slightly worried that they kept saying, "Oh, you're our favourite lefty, and you're the acceptable face of socialism."
That's great,
so,
though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So
it was quite a lovely night.
Unacceptable face of socialism.
We just don't tell some of the comrades.
No, that's right. And James, where were you on the night? You're watching it from the Spectator office, I guess.
A bit of it, and also a few parties. I went to the Carlton for a bit, so there's a funereal for
Carlton to get you, honestly. You're such a blue. Right, now let's talk in this first, because I'm going to have two panels with you. We're going to talk about Labour in this one, and then you're going to react to the Suella Braverman interview after we've done it a little bit later in the show. Let's just talk about this vote share issue. I mean, the idea that Starmer is in government with this massive majority, a bigger majority than probably he could have imagined, although less than the pollsters had predicted at one stage, where they were putting the Tories down to sort of like complete Armageddon. But it is weird, isn't it, Matthew, to have him in there on 34% share of the vote. More people voted for the Conservatives and Reform combined than voted for the Labour Party. And there he is with all